Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Lamoureux. I'm the Manager of Media Relations here at the Department of General Services and serve as the spokesperson for DGS, OPSC, and DSA. It's a pleasure to have you all here. I'm going to serve as your moderator today. And before we get started, I'd like to go through just a few housekeeping and emergency messages. First, on the emergency side of things, if we do have an emergency, we'd ask that you evacuate out these two exit doors through the atrium and out onto the Riverwalk. Okay? Please don't go through the front doors, go out onto the Riverwalk, and that's where we assemble. Restrooms, if you haven't found them already, they're through the atrium, through the elevator lobby, men's and women's restrooms over there. I've already asked everybody to kind of move forward, so I appreciate that. Don't be shy. There's plenty of seats up here, and you can move even closer if you'd like. We're going to be passing microphones around during the presentation. We are webcasting today. So it's important that before you ask a question, make sure you've got a microphone. Even though we can all hear each other pretty well in here, we want to make sure that your colleagues that are watching on the webcast are able to hear your questions as well. So please make sure that you wait for us to get a microphone to you before you begin speaking. Obviously, cell phones, if you've got them with you, please put them on vibrate. Feel free to step out if you need to make a call or talk to someone, but we'd ask that you put those phones on vibrate or stun or whatever feature works best for you. I've indicated we are webcasting today. We do have a number of colleagues that will be joining us online, as has been the case for our other town halls. We have presentations today from both OPSC and DSA. As much as possible, we'd like to get through those presentations and then take your questions on that individual presentation once it's concluded. But if there's a situation where you really have got a question that specific to a particular slide and you want to ask it, feel free to raise your hand. We'll go ahead and take the questions during the presentations as well. I'm going to be working to try to keep us on track and on time. We're scheduled from 1 to 5, but if we don't have enough questions and we need to cut short, we will. But we are set up to provide presentations to you and take your questions up till 5 o'clock. Are there any additional housekeeping questions before we go ahead and get started? Yes?
Is there a public comment period?
Yes, there'll be a wrap-up period, about a half hour at the end. If you haven't asked a question or gotten an answer to your question during the presentations, you can speak then. We'd be happy to take your questions. There's also going to be a number of OPSC, DSA, and DGS contacts that you can follow up with. I'll mention it at the end, but I'll go ahead and mention it at the start too. If you're not sure who to contact, dgsfeedback@dgs.ca.gov. Go ahead and shoot us an email there, and I'll make sure that it gets directed to the right person. To begin, I'd like to introduce Stephen Amos. Stephen Amos is the Chief Deputy Director and oversees statewide support services and administration for the Department of General Services. In this capacity, he oversees our administration division, the Division of the State Architect, our Information Technology Services Division, Procurement Division, and the Interagency Support Division, which of course includes our Office of Public School Construction and the Office of State Publishing. Stephen returned to state service with the state of California after beginning his career here 30 years ago with the then state police. Most recently, he was a corporate officer and business consultant with several energy management and defense firms in Washington, D.C. Prior to that, he served in leadership positions in the transportation, criminal justice, and corrections fields for the states of Maryland and Oregon and the District of Columbia, as well as for the U.S. Department of Justice. Please join me in welcoming Stephen Amos for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Eric, for those gracious comments and introduction, and thank you all for joining us here today. I appreciate all of those of you that are here in person and all of those that are online and going to be monitoring this particular session. Clearly, this focus is a dialogue that is focused on creating a dialogue about how we collectively can improve the process of getting classrooms built. And I think that's sometimes lost in the mix, and I think that's going to be a very important conversation today. You have two panels that are prepared to answer what the newest, most recent efforts and challenges are within DSA and OPSC. A question was made earlier, or a comment was made earlier, a question posed as to whether or not we would be able to field questions and or have time for public comment. Absolutely. This process has been just about that. That is identifying, hearing from the communities what the issues are, what the challenges are, and how we can better respond to those challenges. We started this discussion on March 5th in Oroville and continued over 3 more days in Merced, Costa Mesa, and Rancho Cucamonga, where more than 150 individuals met with us, both districts large and small, and shared their comments, their concerns, and their issues. You spoke and we listened. This particular forum is about hearing from you and reporting back out to you what we heard across the state and providing you an opportunity for public comment. That is so that as we move forward and identify those options, those elements that we think will better serve you, that we do so with your input and your support. As we all work together to build safe and reliable school systems, the state fiscal challenges have not diminished in any way, shape, or form. We're all familiar with the March revise. We understand the challenges that are before us. And as we move forward, we have to look inward. We have to look to what we do, how we do it, and can we better serve. And to that end, we hope to hear your feedback and present to you some of the things that we're working to accomplish. DSA is here to talk to you about their work improvement plan review. They're also here to talk about how we move shovel-ready projects forward and help get projects closed out and creating a more transparent system that measures progress. Many of us have had the dialogue repeatedly about bin. Clearly, bin time is a factor and a consideration that we need to talk about and continue to dialogue about, but more importantly is that there are a lot of other elements that far exceed that entry-level process, and we need to speak to that effort also. And you'll hear from our DSA colleagues here in that regard. OPSC will share with you the stark realities we struggle with today with our existing bond authority that has nearly been exhausted while millions of dollars await fund release requests from districts. Our current funding system limits the ability to prioritize fund releases and get projects started that are ready in terms of getting shovels in the ground and creating jobs. And that's a key concern of this administration. That's what the governor has charged all of us as administrators across the state. We need to reduce the roadblocks. We need to take away the red tape. We need to do what is responsible and move these funds into the communities and, again, build schools, which is our principal priorities. As introduced as the Chief Deputy Director, I'm uniquely poised because I oversee both OPSC and DSA, and to that end, this has been a unique opportunity to hear from school districts about the interface. Sometimes that has been less than optimal, but likewise, as stated earlier, many of the comments we have gotten and have looked to incorporate in our suggestions and feedback to you here today will speak to that need for collaboration and solid commitment to work together. I also appreciate the leadership and the commitment of both organizations that have stepped up within DSA and OPSC to look at these challenges and look inwardly as to the issues that we deal with to, again, promote school construction and ensure that the services that we provide is not only timely but accountable to our taxpayers. I hope that as we work through this process today that we find common ground. I think that's truly the mark of good government, is when we can find where our needs converge and where we find solutions that are meaningful and provide for the type of services that our taxpayers deserve. In addition to that, I again want to encourage you as we go through this process today, ask the questions, ask the hard questions. It's important that we have that dialogue. This is about a process. Many of us get stuck some days on what has been in the past. When we talk about school construction being at a crossroads, what we're referring to is getting stuck in the past and not looking and moving forward collaboratively. At these times when we're struggling with incredible fiscal challenges and competing interests, it's going to be absolutely essential that we identify what works, we maximize that, while at the same time identifying those barriers, those challenges or obstacles that have not served us well or don't serve us well moving into the future. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us here today. I look forward to hearing more from you in this comment phase. I ask that we ensure that everyone's voice gets heard in the room and that the microphone be passed. Please give deference and respect to each party speaking, despite their maybe differing or different perspective on the issues or concerns. Everybody here gets a voice at the table and the opportunity for input. So with that, again, I thank you, everyone here present. I want to recognize the many leaders in the industry that are present here today and have been strong vocal supporters and interested parties in this interest. And again, thank you. I look forward to sitting in and listening to the engagement, and I'll remain present for any comments or questions as we go through the presentations today. So with that, welcome.
Back up for us real quick. Thank you, Stephen. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce all of our presenters, and then I will turn the floor over to Lisa Silverman at the Office of Public School Construction. And Lisa will be our first speaker. Lisa Silverman serves as the Executive Officer for the Office of Public School Construction. She's charged with overseeing the organization that is staffed at the State Allocation Board and implements and administers the school facility program and other programs for the SAB. Lisa brings to her assignment as Executive Officer over 25 years of experience in governmental auditing, including more than 3 years at the Office of Public School Construction. Previously, she served as OPSC's Chief of Fiscal Services. Juan Morales is the Policy Manager for the Office of Public School Construction and is charged with overseeing the implementation of the policy and program changes for OPSC. Juan began working for the Office of Public School Construction in 1998. Since that time, he has held quite a variety of positions at OPSC, from working in the mailroom and the file room, as project manager, program services supervisor, and in his current position as policy manager for program services. From DSA, we have David Thorman. David is the 19th state architect for the state of California. As state architect, David oversees the implementation of the governor's green policy and grid neutral programs while also focusing on policy development for state design and construction. David is a retired United States Navy Reserve Lieutenant Commander, and prior to his state service was an architect with over 40 years of experience in the design and construction industry. Kathy Hicks is Deputy Director for the Division of the State Architect. She oversees the operations and policy functions for DSA and provides overall guidance and direction to staff on a daily basis. Kathy has 19 years of experience working for the state of California, previously as the Chief of the Office of Fleet and Asset Management here at the Department of General Services, as a policy deputy for DSA, and as the Chief of Program Services for the Office of Public School Construction. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Lisa and Juan to talk to us about Office of Public School Construction. Guys?
Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you again. Again, what we're presenting today is an overview about the remaining bond authority and what the financial picture looks like for this program. Again, our goal here is we've been out there in the town halls. We've listened to your comments and your concerns about the money and how much money is available and how much authority is available. Again, those concerns are our concerns as well. The override concerns, again, with the bond authority, will be exhausted for certain programs while other programs remain undersubscribed. You know, and the big question is, will the state be able to fulfill the school district's future facility needs, which is our concerns as well. Consideration must be given to the most effective use of the remaining bond authority by evaluation of shovel-ready projects. And we also are in line with some of the local challenges that we have out there with the local community. You know, economic times is hampering everybody's progress right now. And with that, that may be part of the reasons or some of the reasons why the money isn't flowing out as quickly as we would like to see. Okay. Got the right one? I'm going too far. So with that, again, I think I shared with you Our last bond initiative was November 2006, and it was the last general obligation bond. And we were fortunate to receive a large sum of money out of all the other infrastructure projects or program bonds. And as of April 28, 2010, there's been a limited remaining bond authority for Proposition 47, 55, and 1D, as you'll see in the upcoming charts. Until another general obligation bond is authorized, the school facility funding program is limited to, again, the authority. And the big question lies is what's in the future for us? You know, well, we've exhausted the programs in some areas and, again, undersubscribed in others. And at this board, we'll be processing over $1.7 billion of unfunded approval at the May State Allocation Board. And with that, we're well ahead of our processing versus the cash that's coming in. With our ongoing efforts of outreach and potential regulatory amendments, we hope to overcome some of those challenges. Again. So what this pie chart shows you is we were successful in Proposition 47 to have over $11.4 billion in bond authority. And with that, you can see we've obviously apportioned 95% of those funds, or $10.8 billion. And we have almost nearly 5% of unfunded approvals, which represents $521.8 million. I know you can't see because Juan's in the way. I'm teasing you, Juan. And with that, we have literally less than 0.5% of remaining bond authority of $69 million in Proposition 47. But it kind of carves out for you what we have authority, and it's very limited at this point in terms of Proposition 47. And in Proposition 55, again, this is going over the next bond authorization. We have over $10 billion in authorization, and to date we've apportioned $9.2 billion, which is 93% of those dollars have been committed and apportioned. And out of that, we still have $287 million that's unfunded approvals, which is 3% of that. And we have nearly 4% of bonding authority left, which remains at $454 million. So the last proposition we have to share with you is Proposition 1D, again, one of the last largest infrastructure bond program that was authorized by the voters. And again, we still have $3.8 billion that have been apportioned in those funds, which represent 53% of that bond pot. And we have $904 million of that has been unfunded approvals that have been processed to this board. And the remaining bond authority is over $2.5 billion. So that's 35% of the pie that's still left out there. And if you can see, the larger portions of the pie that's still remaining is, again, overcrowded relief grant, the modernization grant, and there's new construction that's still tucked in there with seismic. Again, we've apportioned nearly all of our new construction grant. So we talk about our cash flow. With the fiscal crisis upon us that came very, very abrupt with us in December 2008, when all of a sudden we just got notification that the state can't go out and sell bonds. So that created a new system for us. And since that fiscal crisis have been in effect, we were actually pretty significantly, everything stopped, everything was halted. We decided to still move forward with unfunded approvals, but obviously the community and spoke out and said that we still have undying needs for this program. So with that, obviously, Department of Finance and the Treasurer's Office orchestrated nearly $4 billion in bond proceeds sales last year. So that's pretty significant. And if you look at all the other infrastructure programs, we were the ones who received the largest portion of those bond funds. And out of those bond funds, we've liquidated nearly $2 billion for your projects. So that's great news. But what's still on the books is nearly $2 billion that's left to be dispersed. So, again, that's a larger concern for us. And on a 10-month average, you'll know that we'll have only processed $38 million a month since we've been out of this freeze. And with that that begs the question of what we do moving forward. If many of you do know that there is a budget letter that was in place that was enacted at the just the day before the prior board. It's Budget Letter 1009. If you're not familiar with that budget letter, the budget letter just basically shares with you the new plan. The new plan is that we can't apportion, which many of you do already know, that we can't apportion any projects unless there's cash committed to that. And with that, Department of Finance also outlined, with that plan, they're going to be evaluating the program needs. And also, in anticipation of evaluating your program needs, we share with them a collective list of all the unfunded approvals. So they're aware that we're sharing this list, we're sharing with them, here's our unmet needs for the program. So with that, they drive that information to figure out collectively over the next few years, what can we do to sell and meet those unmet needs. So with that, that's when we had the largest cash flow that came into the program in March, which was great news. But again, the challenge is they're going to be reevaluating our program to see if that cash is liquidating. Even though they do have a fall schedule, say bond sale that's scheduled to move forward in the fall, it's pretty imperative that we also draw down that cash, because otherwise somebody's going to be choosing those priorities for us. And that's very concerning for us as well. And again, this chart, what this chart depicts, it's the new chart we produced last month. It's basically showing out of that nearly $4 billion in cash that we received in the program, which basically started floating in the program in the end of March of 2009. As of June 2009, we had $681 million that was in our bank account. That represented the projects or the cash that was liquidating. Actually, it was a pretty aggressive pace because obviously everybody was held up for quite some time and waiting for those cash bond proceeds to come in. But it slowly started to dip off in October 2009 we were liquidating our balances, which was great news. So we had only $249 million in the bank. And with that, the additional bond sales that came in October and November, those balances were increasing. And again, where we're at to date, we have nearly $2 billion in our bank account. And as many of you know, during this new whole process, we also have to go through a certification process with the Treasurer's Office. Again, we've identified a new process to obviously overcome some of the challenges or the delays in processing those certifications. So again, last month you'll see in April, you can also see the release of those funds over the last year. And we're happy to report this month we've liquidated $74 million of funds, but last month it was pretty light of $26 million. Again, when I referenced earlier that the average of the funds that would be liquidated is about $38 million a month. And we've got to be conscious of that burn rate, again, because of the fiscal crisis. You know, you need to show a need for cash, and you also need to show the need of a drawdown. So if we continue this rate of $38 million on an average a month of liquidating some of these funds, and if we project that against nearly $2 billion of cash, we could be going at this pace for 52 months. So again, we need to show more of a need of the cash liquidating. And so maybe at this point in time, you realize this is a good opportunity for us to think forward. And as we look forward and think forward of how we can stimulate the economy, bring jobs, build schools, do what we can to the local economy, get those needs out there and get those needs met, it's a challenge for us to overcome that, but we need support from the community to also overcome some of those challenges. And I'll turn it over to Juan because he's going to show you or demonstrate or present to you how we can overcome some of those challenges.
Thanks, Lisa. I apologize in advance if I can't get the slides to move, but I'm going to try. Here we go. I think for those of you that have been involved with the program for quite some time, it's apparent that we are in a new era in school facilities funding. Long gone are the days when we used to be able to borrow money from the Pool Money Investment Account and make apportionments on a regular basis. Instead, we're now faced with a direct funding model, which basically means that we need to have cash before we make apportionments. We also have limited access to the bond markets. We have been very fortunate that we have received some funds from the market, from the recent sales, but even those funds haven't been enough to apportion all the projects that we have in our growing list of approved but not funded projects. We have some issues that we need to address in this new era. Basically, we have to reevaluate the current system and to see if it addresses our current needs. Basically, the current process of making apportionments, it doesn't take the consideration for projects that are ready to begin construction or not. And these are the projects that really do create jobs and stimulate the economy. We realize that districts now submit projects as soon as they're approved by the different agencies, but they may or may not be ready to construct. In this current system, Lisa mentioned the current rate that we're releasing funds. This chart shows you when some of these projects are due. And they're due because they receive an apportionment, but they do have up to 18 months to request this fund release. And for those of you who aren't familiar, to be able to request a fund release, the districts have to be able to certify that they have entered into a binding contract for at least 50% of the construction in the plans, and they have to issue the notice to proceed. So what this illustrates is that basically, and this is sort of a worst case scenario, districts that take the full 18 months, we could have apportionments that aren't due to come in and request the funds all the way through October of 2011. And that is for the full $1.2 billion that we've apportioned. So again, this just illustrates when the 18 months are due from the different apportionments that we've made so far. So what are we doing to face these new changes? The State Allocation Board has recently reevaluated and recognized that we are in a new era. They took action at the April 2010 meeting to explore other methods of making apportionments. What we mean by that is we had several options before the board, and the board decided to explore what we commonly refer to as option 3. Option 3 is basically prioritizing projects that are ready or will be ready to submit a fund release request within 2 to 3 months after receiving an apportionment. The board heard testimony on this approach. They did decide to further explore this possibility. They created a subcommittee to discuss the issues that we need to sort out in terms of implementing different concerns for small school districts, financial hardship projects, etc. So they created a subcommittee. The subcommittee did meet on May 12th. It was a very productive meeting. I want to thank a lot of you that were there that provided testimony. We did get through a whole list of issues that we needed to address in order to, again, implement this new method of making apportionments. So now the plan is to present to the board next week an action plan. And an action plan to, again, rethink the way we've been making apportionments. I realize, and I've been involved with this program for over 10 years, and this is a major change to the way we've been making apportionments. But given the current circumstances, we think that it's appropriate for the board to reconsider and reevaluate this current system to adapt to our ever-changing environment. So with that, I want to leave you with this quote that I thought was highly appropriate for our current situation. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is anew, so we must think anew and act anew. Abraham Lincoln. With that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions on our part of the presentation, or we can move along to DSA. Okay.
Any questions for OPSC and this presentation? and raise your hand. Yes, down here in front.
Is this on? Hi, I'm Patty Herrera with the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. I just had a question for Lisa and Juan about the remaining bond authority. That those graphs that you showed us are very telling and are really important, but I was just wondering if it might be possible to get the more detailed data about the remaining bond authority in each of the programs, specifically new construction. I see that you parsed it out on the graph, but there's no way for us to really measure what those dollar amounts are, and I'm just wondering if it'd be possible to get that information.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't realize it was on. Yeah, I think that's something that we definitely want to show on the website and post on our website. I think that's relative information. And actually, there was also, we wanted to show a new way to present a status of funds to make it more easier to understand. And so that's what we're planning to do is put that graphic in part of every month's status of funds. So everyone has a true understanding of what the authority that's left and what buckets.
And the dollar amounts will be, you will be able to actually see the dollar amounts
Yes.
for each pot? Okay,
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Another question? Right, 2 rows back.
Thank you. Richard Gonzalez of Richard Gonzalez and Associates. I understand that the fact that we have to apportion money as cash is made available. Given that we have on a couple of occasions had the treasurer successfully sell bonds, the certification process takes a little time. Has there been an exploration of asking the Pool Money Investment Board to provide the cash flow for the amount of the bonds that were actually sold and then reimbursed as soon as those sales occur?
Actually, I think I just had a conversation with the chair on that topic, whether or not the Pool Money Investment Board will ever come back. And so I think that's something that Department of Finance is exploring. I understand the certification issue going back a few months ago. To address that first question, we've worked out a better certification process. So what we plan to do is in advance of the board, knowing that the projects we plan to move forward, we advance that list and the certification. And so globally having that process down to 5 days. But going back to your other question about the Pooled Money Investment Board, again, that's something Department of Finance, I would have to defer to them and the Treasurer's Office as whether or not they're going to create another Pooled Money Investment Board. And I know they're talking about another way of advanced planning and getting cash back and having a fluid flow of cash to the program, but that's something that they're exploring, and I don't have the details on any of that information.
I'm Paul Arnold from a small school district up in Northern California, Bangor Elementary, and I attended the town hall meeting. I have a question, more of a layman's question. We were approved for new construction and modernization for a finite amount of money, and I was a little confused as to the bonding authority, and do the projects that have been approved as a financial hardship district exceed the amount of money that you have bonding authority for?
We haven't created a true unfunded list. So, I mean, you say you received an unfunded approval, or you haven't?
No, we haven't got that far yet. We're still in OPSC, but I know that we've been approved for an amount of money to construct a new school facility, and I was, I guess, confused as to whether the amounts of approvals for our district and for districts like ours have exceeded the amount of bonding authority or the amount of bonds that you're authorized to sell.
Well, and I know in new construction, there's, and for the program, it's a possibility that that pot will be exhausted sometime in July. And so with that, if you're just submitting a project in, I know there's other projects that are currently on the workload list. And so it's trying to redefine where the line is cut off. So, I mean, that's something we could, I think our workload list is out. I mean, we publish that every month.
Online.
Yeah, it's available every month. So it's the timing of those projects. So if we're passing to July, how far back does that go?
It's about 150 days.
So if they have their prior to that.
But I want to clarify one point. When you say that you've been approved for funding for a certain amount, are you referring to financial hardship? So you were approved, but you haven't come in and actually been approved for funding of those projects. Is that correct?
Correct. For new construction as a financial hardship district, we were approved for $800,000, some of which we've already received the design apportionment for and have concluded that phase. I was just, I guess I had a question as to if we were approved, would that amount that we were approved for not be reflected in the bonding authority that currently exists?
No. The way the process works is you get that financial hardship approval, and what you receive is an approval of being a financial hardship district. Then you have to come in and submit a funding application. Once we review that application and we present it to the board, then you will be placed on an unfunded list. Until that happens, we still don't include that project in the list of projects that have been approved but are waiting for funds. So we still have to, again, depending on when you submit your funding applications, we're going to process them and then put them on the list in a first in, first out order.
Okay, and then the priority that is being approved or being looked at SAB is a shovel-ready project. So a shovel-ready is simply defined as being able to begin construction within a 2 to 3 month timeline.
Shovel-ready is a loose term. The priorities in funding item that we presented in April and we're taking back at May, we are creating a process that identifies projects that certify that once you receive an apportionment, you will be able to submit a fund release request. And to us, again, the fund release request requires that you have entered into a binding contract for at least 50% of the work in the plans and spec, and you have issued a notice to proceed. So for purposes of our priorities and funding item, that's the requirement. Within 75, 90 days from receiving an apportionment, you submit your fund release request. And some would say that that's considered to be shovel-ready. But the requirement is that you submit the fund release request within the specified time frame.
Bill Savage, West Contra Costa School District and Chair of CASH. I just wanted to comment, and we've gone through 2 years ago, everything coming from the state and everything hitting local school districts was shut down the funding. We can't afford the debt service on the state in terms of our general fund budget. Stop the flow of money, stop everything. Districts were stopped by changes in assessed valuation. We didn't need schools. Things were closing down. So all the messages we got 2 years ago were stop. And now all the messages are go, because I think the state has finally realized that one of the great things about releasing money is that it creates jobs on the local level, that increases tax revenue, that goes back to the general fund, that keeps our economy going. So we're all part of this process, and I think we've gotten really different messages at different times from the state of California, and that's just when people are there, we're all in the middle of doing this, and these are new times, and they're very difficult, but we've all gotten real conflicting messages over the last few years, I think, is just my comment on that. And in terms of a general comment on funding priorities, I think it's really important for OPSC to engage people in the field as you're doing and continue to do that, because I think we're more concerned about the unintended consequences of taking a rash action or trying to get the money out or trying to get all those shovels ready as fast as possible and doing things that will harm districts or that will make districts that have somehow a perceived less priority go to the back of the line and never get their money. So I think just make sure that you are also focused on the complexity of the situation. And some of the complexity is pretty straightforward. Modernization projects can be done retroactively. And so we're many times, our district, so speaking as a district person now, we're almost always already under contract and many times done with the project when we come in. So as long as modernization there isn't a requirement that we have to be doing, signing the contract and going right now, that reimbursements are handled as part of this process, then that works, because what really is important for districts is a certainty related to cash flow. We go through our own cash flow analysis. We have a large program. We're looking ahead. We plug in our state funds when we think we'll need them. And the cash flow and the certainty of getting state funds as a reimbursement is what lets us free up money, our money, for starting the next job. So it really is all about shovel ready. And so I think recognize the complexities, watch out for the unintended consequences, and remember that we've gotten conflicting messages from you over the last 2 years. Stop, now go. And so let's all go together and let's figure out a way to do it that doesn't mess it up even more than it is.
Hi, I'm Steve Newsom with LPA, and as an architect I have clients who, and I just want to echo what Bill was saying, clients who are holding back on moving a project forward and giving us the direction to proceed with design because of that uncertainty. So I think a very clear method of communication would in itself be a stimulus to moving projects forward if they know with certainty what funds are available, when they would be available, et cetera, et cetera. So, thanks.
I want to comment first on Bill's comment prior. Reimbursements is an issue that was discussed at the subcommittee on May 12th. It's also going to be part of the discussion at the board next week. So it's something that we are aware of. We have been discussing it with the public, with the subcommittee, with the stakeholders. And also one thing that I didn't highlight in our presentation is that right now this alternative method, it's really just for this $450 million that we have available. And I didn't really specify that as part of the presentation, but I do want to bring it up so that people know that this is for the board's consideration. We are just talking about the $450 million that we do have available to be apportioned right now.
It's a pilot project, essentially.
Yes.
If you will.
Yes. And to answer your question about projections, I know that's what part of the budget letter is handing out or scheduling future bond sales. And part of that is they're scheduling a fall sale. Again, they're mapping it out for a 3-year plan, what the future need is for the program. And so there is a tentative plan for a sale for us for the fall, but it's how successful they are in the bond and whether or not who prioritizes the program. So it's something that we have no control of.
You ask your question one more time with the mic. Thank you.
Jenny Berneman, Santa Rosa City Schools. Where does CTE fall in apportionment? Career Tech money? Is that involved in the $450 million?
It's the $450 million. It will be available to all projects that have received an unfunded approval, and to date, and we're also going to include the projects that we're presenting at the May board. So all the projects again that have been submitted and approved on an unfunded basis, they will be able to compete, if you will, for this $450 million if they can certify that they will be able to submit a fund release request within 75 or 90 days, whatever the board decides.
Then what happens to the projects that don't meet that competition? I'm not exactly sure if it would be like a lottery, because right now I have 2 projects. We're just waiting for DSA approval, and we're ready to enter into a contract, but we have our money. We don't have your money. We can't construct, and we're held to that 18 months. So we're very concerned about losing our money based on the fact that the state can't provide us with theirs.
Did you get a reservation under CTE already?
Yeah, we are approved for 2 cycle 2s. We've already done 2 cycle 1s. We have 2 cycle 2s in the process, and then we've also just recently received cycle 3s, 2 of those as well. So we're spending a lot of upfront money planning these projects, meeting the deadlines that you guys have been set, but we haven't received any of our money yet. Or you know where I'm going.
Yes. Those projects are on a little bit different situation. Those projects have already actually received an apportionment, so you do have that reservation for your project. Now you just have to come in and submit your plan approvals within the 1 year, and then you can submit the fund release. But you have actually, you're in a fortunate position that you received an apportionment. What we're talking about is for projects that haven't received that apportionment yet, that are on the unfunded list. So you wouldn't have to compete for this.
So okay, we wouldn't have to compete, but I guess what I'm asking is, if I submit my plans tomorrow to you guys, when would I get the money for construction? I think that's our black box here at a district. We don't know when we would get our money, because once we submit our plans to you, our 18-month clock starts. So we have to plan for construction.
The 18 months will not start until you actually get notification from us that we received your plans, and I actually forgot the name of the letter. Acceptance letter, thank you. So we will send you an acceptance letter, and then from that point, your 18 months will start. So, and it's actually a very good point just for everybody else. For everybody else that is not on the unfunded list, the rules will still apply as we've been managing the program. So in your situation, the rules aren't going to change. You still can come in and submit your plans. Once you submit your plans, we're going to review it. We're going to evaluate them. We're going to send you this acceptance letter, and then you'll get your funds released.
That's good news.
And Michelle Hooley from Marysville School District. Do you have any idea of when the third round of CTE applications, whether we'll hear if we've gotten a grant or not? What the timeline on that's going to be?
Yeah, right now we have I think we're shooting for sometime in the summer, but we really don't have any specific board meetings.
Okay.
We're still evaluating those projects.
Are there any other questions in the room? Okay. Well, I think we're running a little ahead of schedule, so let's go ahead and get started with the Division of the State Architect. Before I bring up David and Kathy, just a reminder to everybody, we've got a couple different resources for you. An email address, opscnews@dgs.ca.gov for questions on OPSC. Obviously, their website address as well. And with that, we'll bring up David Thorman and Kathy Hicks.
Right button to
Use the arrows because that mouse is touching.
Okay. We're going to do a duet. I'm going to kick it off and talk big picture, and Kathy's going to tell you the real part of it, the detail. I want to start off by saying that this action plan that we're going to be talking about is really a continuation of a lot of work that's been underway for the last several years at DSA in terms of greater effectiveness and efficiency. We've established a statewide teams. We did customer service training. Electronic plan review is well underway. We have the DSA Academy. We're starting the electronic offices. The certification guide is in place. We went through a closeout program, closed out 7,500 projects, and we started the prioritization on the shovel-ready projects actually over a year ago. I would also like to recognize three leaders that we have in the room. Frank Neeson, our operations deputy, Dan Lavernier, our regional manager for Sacramento, and Craig Rush, our regional manager for Sacramento and San Diego for Craig. I think everybody knows both of them. In any case, they'll be available for comments or questions once we get through our presentation. Under the leadership of Stephen Amos, he joined us last fall, and bringing Kathy on board to really head up our operations, we have really started to focus in on some of the weaker points of DSA in terms of overall management, finance, metrics, those areas that needed to be beefed up so that we can be transparent, we can give you good information, we can have the information to give to you. Our efforts are underway We have been in this action plan since January. As we go through our presentation, we'll get into more detail. But it is ongoing. It is interactive. We've had these work sessions. We've also had work sessions with the community colleges and with several school districts. Our action plan, we have a commitment to reduce bin time. That was made several months ago. We're now down close to 4 weeks. The commitment was to bring down to 6 weeks. We have a commitment to reduce plan review time from intake to stamp out. We have some analysis that we will share with you shortly. And we have a commitment to eliminate the Type 4 letters in terms of closeout and certification. These are 3 key elements that we are working on now. Metrics, I think, are important. As I mentioned, Kathy has great expertise in this and is putting a team in place to establish a baseline of existing work efforts, to benchmark DSA functions, to enhance e-tracker so that we have better information, better transparency for us internally and for you as you come on to e-tracker. And we're going to start regularly checking performance in terms of all of these different areas to see where we can improve or where we might come to you and ask for you to improve. Just to point out, DSA strives for efficient operations, enable economic stimulus, ensuring public safety. That's always our number one concern, and consistency in application of code. Measuring progress. To adequately address issues, DSA needs a transparent system that provides real-time data on all stages of DSA reviews and construction oversight. Examples, plan review time, how long does it take for DSA to conduct intake and plan review? How long does it take for the architect to address the DSA comments? Determining incomplete submittals, what are the common items that lead to incomplete submittals? And then the use of shovel-ready prioritization. Shovel-ready continues to be in place. We continue to be committed to economic stimulus. The town halls were really a major step for us in terms of going out to you, to the individual architects and district representatives to find out what your concerns were, what your issues were. And I do believe that the common concerns that we heard included delayed reviews and inconsistencies. Hit the button. Project closed without certification. Constructive proposals that lead to positive collaboration on solutions. We are looking at process corrections. A lot of those are already underway and in place. Potential regulatory changes and possible legislative proposals that will enable us to become more efficient and sensitive to the direction we're moving. Concerns that we heard, the common concerns, again, bin time reduction efforts on DSA, other services and programs, inconsistencies. The question is, what is DSA doing to stop inconsistencies between plan reviewers and regional offices? I mentioned earlier the statewide teams that have been underway for several years. Those are being beefed up. This is our ability to go into each office, get the leader of the different disciplines, get them together to make sure that when we do code interpretations, they're consistent across the board. We're also looking at metrics to make sure that we are doing this consistently. And, of course, we have the DSA Academy, which trains not only our people, but all architects and school district representatives. We recognize concerns with project closed without certification. What are we doing in this area? We know it's expensive and time-consuming for districts to provide documents to certify old projects. There's an ongoing liability for governing boards of districts that's sometimes questioned as to what that liability is. Luckily, we haven't had any situations where we have to find out. DSA cannot approve additions, alterations to uncertified construction. Again, a concern in terms of those projects that need to move ahead. and we'll talk about some of the solutions. There are many uncertified relocatables throughout the state. In some places, missing implant inspection reports. DSA actions and options for change. Step in any time here. Bin time reduction. We have, as I mentioned, gone from 12 weeks down to just over 4. That was done by augmenting staff from other parts of DGS, primarily RESD, by putting our supervisors and our managers back on the board, doing plan review, and several other activities that have made us much more efficient and much more effective in terms of the plan review. In terms of closeout, we now have a dedicated team that's in place. That team will probably be augmented by some of the comments and directions that we have come up with since we started the town halls. DSA is undertaking an effort to review projects which it did not complete back check. We have discovered that this has been a serious problem, and we have had plans turned in that were obviously not ready for back check. There were more placeholders. We have started sending those back to make sure that they're complete before our people start spending their time on them. We're developing a verification process for self-certification of Category 1 shovel-ready projects. Inconsistency, interpretation, application of code is inconsistent. This is the second major area that we heard in the town halls. We have the DSA Academy, which I mentioned earlier, and the statewide teams. Options to consider in terms of inconsistency has to do with performance metrics, and I do believe that Kathy has some good ideas in terms of how we can use those metrics to start to build greater consistency. We'll provide monitoring of standards compliance and will identify reviews that are not sufficiently thorough or look beyond minimum code compliance. And once identified, the issues can be specifically addressed through training, discipline if necessary, or policy development. Closeout and certification. I mentioned a dedicated closeout team. Headquarters is working on the Type 4 certifications. These are the ones that we're most concerned about where there could be a health or safety issue. Those have to be addressed first, and then we'll move into the other closeout issues. And I'll go into some of or I'll let Kathy go into some of the detail on what we're doing.
We are currently preparing a list of all the projects that are closed without certification to mail out to the districts, because one of the frequent concerns we've heard was that we're not aware what projects in the past that are closed without certification until you come forward with a project and try and move forward with a new modernization or some kind of new construction or addition on an existing site, and you can't do work on that school because you have an existing project that's closed without certification. Just one word of warning, we're trying to be very careful about the accuracy of our data, and we have some old tracking systems that may not be completely accurate, so we're going to share with you a list, but that doesn't mean that it's the final answer on, as we go through our records and you come forward with new projects and we open up an old file, we still may find more projects that were closed without certification. We've done a lot of work on preparing a closeout guide that helps you figure out how to deal with some of the most common problems we've heard in terms of projects that are where you can't find an architect of record or inspector of record because they're no longer operating or they're not even living any longer. So some of those frequent things that you're dealing with, and the older the projects, the worse the problems are for you in terms of dealing with those issues.
Okay, some of the options that we're looking at for closeout, and I'll go through 4. Option 1, certify the project or the building using typical certification processes and procedures. That's what we're doing now. That's option 1. Option 2, certify the building project using typical certification, using alternate means and methods presented in the DSA certification guide. I hope all of you are familiar with that guide. It's very thorough, and there are a lot of potential options on a lot of projects where you have situations where someone has died or the organization, the architectural organization, is no longer in existence. The third option, and this is new and just being developed, and this is where the engineer or the architect would be able to certify under certain conditions. The concept is provide a program under which a structural engineer and or architect, or maybe both, can cause certification. This is a new concept, one that we will be exploring with the task force. And then the fourth option, DSA allows some construction to occur on uncertified buildings. So we're taking this very seriously, and we're looking at all options to try to simplify it, along with just general streamlining of the basic option one process.
Just some clarification on that fourth option, because it sounds too good to be true, so there are a lot of caveats that go with it. The project must have been DSA approved for construction in the first place, so it's not just free ticket, go do what you want to do. There are definitely strings attached to make sure that we ensure that our students are in safe facilities. The second caveat is that the project must have been closed with Type 4 letter or the Type 4 letter issues fully resolved prior to carrying out the program. So we want to remove all health and safety issues, and we're hoping that what you're constructing on is a building that has some missing ministerial paperwork, nothing severe, and then, or unpaid fees maybe, and we can argue about that much longer. No need to hold up construction to keep bickering. And the other is the scope is associated with health and safety, such as fire alarms, fire sprinklers, egress, bathrooms, ramps, electrical, HVAC, other necessary repairs. So we can discuss that later if you have more questions, and Craig and Dan could pitch in with some of the specifics of what we're looking at. But this would be changes that we're proposing to make with your input, and to make sure that we come up with a workable process so that we can ensure that we are meeting your needs to help get these old projects closed with certification.
Streamlining and transparency. Reviewing existing processes to identify unnecessary procedures. For example, stakeholders, including LAUSD, have suggested, and we agree, that the DSA does not need to approve every change order. We do need to see every change order, but there's some that are purely administrative or non-structural, or really do not affect the codes that we oversee that could be, I'm sorry?
No, it was actually an unusual, no, I'm just kidding. It was a very, actually, they came forward with a suggestion, and they said, we shouldn't have to give you all of our change orders. And I said, but it's required by statute and regulation. And then we talked, and finally I realized I wasn't listening because I was so sure that I was right. And when I finally stopped to listen, I heard, wow, you're right. The code says that they have to submit them to us. There was no requirement that DSA review those that don't have structural, fire and life safety, or access. So be happy that LAUSD kept hitting me again and again with the same thing till I was finally listening. So mea culpa that I didn't hear you the first time, and thank you for coming back again.
Way to go, LA. In any case, a nice clarification.
And the good news for all of you is we've done some preliminary look at what that means to us in terms of workload and streaming our operations and being able to be more efficient overall. Approximately 40% of the change order work that we do during the construction phase could be eliminated, because most of that 40% of our work that we do in change orders has nothing to do with the construction process that we really need to be moving forward with. So thank you, Eric.
Another proposal is to allow for a change order that is attached to an approved FCD to eliminate additional reviews on the part of DSA.
And on these, this not just, that's the end of the discussion. That is, we will be coming up with processes and procedures so that there's clear instructions either through a bulletin or some other communication with you guys. And we're not done discussing this. We're looking forward to meeting with you further to make sure that it what we come up with is workable. I mean, that it's not just a concept, that it really is something that works and helps streamline our process and yields efficiencies for both of us.
Go ahead through the next three. Okay, again, part of what we want to do is work strongly within DSA to make these improvements, but we also want to identify the process owners, whether it's DSA, the district, or the architect or the engineer, so that all of us can work together to come up with new solutions and make data readily available on the website through eTracker as transparent as possible.
I think the message here that we want everybody to hear is that we're committed to making sure that we are identifying process problems and focusing our efforts on providing solutions instead of pointing blame at each other and move forward.
This next slide will give you an idea
to switch
of the volatility at DSA. Actually, the next two slides. To by how much money is being allocated or how much money is available, or if there's going to be a new code change, or there's some other indicators, but by and large, we can have $1 billion come in 1 month. We might have 100,000 or 500 million, so it's all over the place. This naturally affects our bin time. As the projects come in, the more projects come in, the higher the bin time. The next slide.
Wait, no. That has historically been the case. This slide actually tells you a lot of things. Number one, the very reason that we started having these meetings and how we came to realize that we needed to implement performance metrics is demonstrated by this picture. The big claim that hit the paper was that furloughs were the cause of this huge bin time. And we met with Harry Hallenbach, who is the former state architect, and when he was appointed by the governor 19 years ago, his charge at that time was to reduce bin time. And so bin time has historically been a problem at DSA. And the beautiful thing about this graphic is that for the little line here that you're looking at is what we've done since January. But more importantly, that big hump way back there in 2008 and 2009 on the bin, the very first big lump there, that horrible bin time problem at that time predated furloughs. So furloughs are not the cause of the bin time problem, but we are using them as part of our solution so that we can bring people in and use dedicated self-directed furlough Fridays to help get out of the situation that we're in. I had another point about this. Oh, we're gone. Actually, the other point is in performance metrics, we are trying to put sustainable change, make sure that the changes that we're making are sustainable, and that we, with our workload balancing and being able to monitor all of this workload on a regular basis, are more nimble and flexible. And this actually begins to speak to the issue of workload balancing statewide. And everybody says, oh, you're focusing all your attention at the front end, receiving plans coming in and only doing the plan review. That's not the case. We're not sending everybody to the front of the ship and sending it to the bottom of the ocean. We are monitoring workload both as it comes in the door and across the continuum through all the construction phase and through certification of the projects to make sure that we are ready to go out and increase our workforce if we need to, whatever the workload demands, but we will have the measurements necessary to support our requests. And it'll be even more important because we've gone on budget this year for the first time, so we will need to be able to have workload justification to prove the need for additional staff.
Okay, here's the structural fund project cost. You see this big blip in January of 2008. That's when there was a code change. So everybody held up their plans, and then all of a sudden, what was it, $2 billion worth of projects came in the office. So you can see how volatile our work can be.
But this is actually representative of the work coming into our office at any given time. but it doesn't necessarily speak to the amount of work that we have going on an ongoing basis, because as all of you know, the planning horizon for the school and what's in our queue can go up to like 12 years. Between the time frames when you submit it to us and we go back and forth with our plan review and the back checks, and even after it's approved, actually just for back check, once we've completed our comments, IR A17 says you can take 6 months to come back in for back check. We can extend it for another 6 months. So assuming that it was a medium-sized project, we returned it, you took the full 12 months to come back in for back check, we could get into 2 years before you ever get your project approved. And now we've done, I don't remember whether the bulletin or an IR, but at any rate, we've extended the time frame that you can use that project once it's approved up. Used to be 4 years, now it's been extended to 5 years because of the economic conditions. And then once it goes into construction, I think a high school project, they're estimating that it takes about 5 years. So if it was a high school project, and just estimate, you could get into the neighborhood of 12 years. And so those sometimes move forward, and then they sort of hold idle for a while until you figure out what you're going to do with them. So there's a lot of work in our queue that we're dealing with, and just looking at 12,000 projects that I'm aware of that are closed without certification speaks volumes about where we need resources, and it's not just measured by the picture of what's coming in our door at any given time.
Yeah, let me point out that we average about 3,000 projects a year coming in. And when you talk about a time span like this, you can multiply 3,000 times that time span. And that is also $7 to $8 billion worth of work. So the volume is tremendous. Okay, the next one. I'll let you talk about this one.
Well, this is a sample of where we're headed with our metrics, and I don't know if any of you have logged on to our website recently, but we are now posting lots and lots of metrics. This is just a preview of where we're headed, but historically the legislature has asked for us to provide for them our average bin time and the average days that it takes to stamp out and approve a project. And while we could definitely provide that, it didn't provide the transparency and accountability that we wanted to bring to everybody's attention. And so what we've created and what's temporarily posted on our chart at the request, I think initially, of Senator Simidian, is a spreadsheet that has all projects that were submitted to DSA on or after January 1st that were stamped approved as of May 12th. And for those projects, I think there was 645 projects. 33 of those projects were returned for being incomplete submittals. It took them on average 8 days to return those projects to us. And eventually we'd like to refine this graph so that it can also, the blue section you see at the front is the 8 days average for the incomplete projects to be returned. Part of that time is the intake triage that we do, so that's not fully capturing the differentiation between DSA responsibility or the design professional's responsibility, so we're looking to refine that, just so you know. The orange is the DSA bin time. That's how long it was in our bin. For that past year's period, it was 40 days. With our bin time now at, and staying close to 4.2, 4.3 weeks on average over the last few months, that orange section will be continuing to decrease or has already decreased. That was past year. The DSA plan review time is the next section. Average plan review time for DSA is 15. On the website, we actually have it broken down so you can see the overall average, but we also show small, intermediate, and large, and the averages for those, because it does make a difference. We always tell them, well, it depends on the size of the project and the complexity of the project, yada, yada. They're tired of hearing me say that, probably. The green is the design professional correction days. That's after we've returned it for you and before you come in back into back check. On average, that's 52 days. The next section is the DSA and the design professionals back check. So we're saying that that's shared time where we're working to resolve the final checks to make sure that this project is code compliant can be stamped out. And then the final lighter blue section is the number of days that it takes us to send you the stamp out letter. So this is the big picture, the summary. We actually, on that, on our website, there's an entire listing of all 645 projects. There's a space where you can fill in the project number, and it will give you this specific detail for this specific project.
Let me point out that when you add up the time that it's actually at DSA and the time that it's back with the architect, it's about 50-50 for the total project time from when it's turned into us and goes through triage through the time that it's stamped out. Now, from a perception standpoint, the clients, the legislators, everybody else think that the time it comes in to DSA at the very beginning until it's stamped out is the DSA time. The reality is it's only in our office for half of that time. And I think as we start to focus in on exactly where these issues are, that we'll be able to cut this total time down considerably, maybe by half.
So, and moving forward, well, actually, we've already improved our time, as I said. We're at under 5 weeks, so let's assume that our average processing time is now 30 days. So we've improved our average by 10 days, or since we were previously responsible for about 51% of the total time, although that's actually giving us credit for half of the incomplete days. I should also note that every time we receive an incomplete application, then we're committed to reworking that when it comes back in to check to see if it is complete. So we're being generous with the credit on that, but we've improved our processing time already down to 40% of the time, 47% of the time instead of 51. But this is also just the beginning. I think we've posted up there all, I think, Mr. Duffy, you asked me, could I prove that I wasn't just gaming the system on the bin time, because I announced early on that I could. That is, that I could take those projects that were in the bin. There was 285 projects in the bin on January 21st when we started this process, and we laid them out in date arrayed order and figured out that in order to reduce our bin time to 6 weeks, we had to assign 235 projects for review. And we said, okay, that's our goal, and this is what we have to do. We worked through the whole process of identifying the capacity that we had because we had certain constraints. We weren't going to authorize overtime, and we weren't going to hire outside consultants. Could we do this? So we did the analysis and proved that, in fact, we could do it. I was a little nervous because I said that we could, and my word was on this. But these guys came through with flying colors, and we actually beat our goal or objective, and we're at less than 6 weeks within about 4 weeks, so sooner than we expected. But also in response to the concern that maybe I had gamed the system, we posted an entire spreadsheet with all 285 projects listed, that if you're interested in your project that was in the bin at that time and where it is, it's all listed on there. It's updated weekly. Another mistake I made, I gave Senator Simitian and Senate Budget Subcommittee 4 staff a link that was date-specific instead of sending them to the website where they were seeing the updates that I was posting on a weekly basis. So they're less than pleased with my posting abilities. Actually, it is posted, and now we've improved what's posted, but all the bin time there, anything you want to know about it and where it's moved in the process, in all the projects that were in there is done. We also have posted over concerns about whether or not the average bin time that we're reporting is completely accurate, or maybe we're trying to hide one regional office being way better than some of the others. And so in order to support that we are truly balancing our workload across the offices, on our website we've now posted our bin time by discipline, by regional office, and by category. So you can check that, in fact, what we are posting is the structural bin time, which is the worst case scenario of the service that you're getting. So in many cases, it exceeds the 4.2 weeks that we are, and we're updating that weekly. Also,
can we ask questions about this slide while it's up? Or
sure.
Break the protocol?
Absolutely.
Sorry, it's just since it's up there. Thank you. This data looks like it compiles a lot of different types of projects, and some of the projects are skewing the data. I have never, what this tells me is that my design professional is taking more time to correct the plans than DSA is taking to check them. That's I've never had a project with that situation. So you've got some data that's not right. Or you've got different types of projects that are skewing the information, and I'd be happy to share my data with you anytime. You show me yours, that kind of thing. But it just flies in the face of my experience of 12 years of running projects through DSA or running them into DSA. And so I think it's important to make sure that you're doing it by project type, very small projects, very large projects, medium projects, modernization, new construction, so that you can make sure we have an accurate understanding. And because it's not helping. I think what you're doing is helping. I'm not criticizing what you're doing, but what this is showing, I have never had an experience like this ever.
Okay, well, just to be helpful, at the bottom of our webpage, it says, if you believe any of the above information to be incorrect, please contact us and we give you a website that you can work with us. This particular parameters or selection of data that we've posted was at the request of Senate Sub 4. And you can't, and so let me tell you where we're headed, and that is, on this, that's actually the summary data that's posted, but you can look at each and every individual project and it will give you the specific details on the projects. And more importantly, we're headed to hopefully having live on eTracker that you can go in and click on any project and it'll give you this summary breakdown, because what's happening right now is we're finding there's a lot of school districts when they log on to the eTracker and try and check on their projects, they don't understand what it is that they're seeing there, so we're trying to make it as helpful as possible. It may take us a while so to get to the search function that we can help it if you don't know exactly the project number that you need to track a project or whatever. But just to humor me, I would be happy to go back and search just your records and give you all of your history, and we'll see, because this was just what they requested, but I'd be more than happy to do a Bill Savage project search and give you.
I'm not asking for that.
We can search by architect.
I guess all we can do is understand what my experience is. I've never had even the smallest project ever approved in 15 days at DSA, ever.
Bill, let me suggest two things.
Okay.
One, you may be very unique as a school district. The second is, I think that you probably should meet with Kathy or her team to see if we're measuring at the same points, and then look at some of your projects and see if we're in mesh or not.
Actually, and so what we have dealt with in the past in this function, in both DSA and OPSC, is anecdotal data that is based on my experience, in my 20 years of experience, in my 12 years of experience, and I'm saying let's let the data do the talking. And so any walk you want me to walk, I'll put the data up and we'll check it.
I have just a question about the specifics of when the plan review is completed, when the red bar stops. Because typically what we'll do is we'll receive fire, we'll receive access comments first, and then we cannot schedule our back check, of course, until we have received the structural comments. So as soon as I receive the structural comments, that day or the next day, we typically will call DSA to schedule an appointment for back check. And that based on your schedules at DSA, is usually 3 to 4 weeks out. And so then we will, and that's not a problem, and we'll get our documents to our consultants and we'll address the comments, and that's our deadline of the back check appointment. So now my question is, the plan review, I know that a plan reviewer reviews the plans and marks them up, and then it'll go to a supervisor or another engineer, correct, or another plan checker, and then they are sent out. So what does that exactly represent?
it's supposed to be that we are measuring the worst case, that is, when it is finally sent back to you. But that's, you know what, bring on the questions. The point is, again, not to point blame, but to work with you to refine this so that we agree that it is measuring exactly what we want it to measure, and we use it as a tool to identify problems, and we make sure that we put processes and procedures in place that help streamline the process to the benefit of all parties.
And I really appreciate that. And now I'm going to, you have to remember for school districts, right, we're in the middle. So I'm going to just line up with these two right here. Because we're to a certain extent, I was going to use the word victim, but I won't use that. We're sort of caught in the middle between DSA and between our design professionals, because, as you may know, the design professionals have a certain issues that come up, and you've referenced some of them in a polite way, complete plans, whatever, but we're stuck in the middle to a certain extent.
Excuse me, Bill. One of the things that Eric failed to mention is that I have 40 years of experience in design and construction, mostly schools in the private sector. You are responsible. You are the district. The architect works for you. You're not caught in the middle.
Well,
you're responsible.
Yeah, you're right. I have his contract, and I can abuse him like crazy and not pay him in the whole deal. Yes, I totally agree. However, but you can't flog them into performing, and you can't flog DSA into performing either, apparently. So on either side.
Yes, you can.
Well,
Stephen can.
So anyway, we're kind of caught between the design professional and DSA, in a rock and a hard place to a certain extent, because if what you're telling me is true, we should be really upset with the architects, not you.
That's right.
Okay. I thought that was a message.
Well, or upset with yourself for not doing a better job of managing your contract.
Ouch. Okay, this is our last slide. Our commitments. The DSA is committed to identifying processing inefficiencies that would free up DSA staff time, improve the delivery of services, and streamline the school construction process to stimulate the economy and minimize district expenditures, you like that, Bill, in the process. The result will be the most cost-effective process for everyone involved and ultimately the taxpayers. Thank you.
Actually, wait. Oh, you can leave that if you want. But
Hey, while you're getting ready to go on, I just wanted to ask if we can get copies of these PowerPoint presentations, also because I know that some of our operatives who are watching on the computers are having some difficulty with it. So either if it could be posted and we could get it off the website or something like that.
Okay, I'll share it. So we kind of flew through this in the presentation, so I wanted to tell you with the shovel-ready projects that the shovel-ready process that started in 2009, we are getting ready to send out a letter to all districts letting you know that we have done an audit of those projects, and for the most part, it's working fairly well. Just one letter is going out first to let everybody know that we have audited it, and we will continue to audit it on a regular basis now to see whether or not the project started. And we've made some corrections to our Form 10 to clarify the process to make sure that it's understandable. And the point there being that this is an iterative process, that we heard you, it wasn't working, they weren't absolutely clear about what that process meant and whether or not you needed to file a Form 10 or what have you. But the point is we really are trying to focus on making sure that we prioritize the processing of those projects that truly are going to end up stimulating the economy. Those that we've deemed shovel-ready, the criteria that we originally had said that you had to start construction within 75 days. When we did our audit, we found several school districts that actually didn't make it within 75, but they were within a reasonable time frame there, meaning that we accepted those as good faith effort to meet the needs of prioritizing projects. However, there are some that have yet to start construction, approximately 100 of them. They will get a separate letter that says, don't do it again because we're watching. I know this is very un-DSA-like to actually go back out and audit it, but we're starting to do that process. The other thing is in terms of, DSA is too slow. I want you to understand we are now looking at the number of projects that we returned our initial review and that have not yet come back for back check. This is an example of how metrics can be applied internally and externally. One, you need to know we've identified over 1,000 projects worth $1.5 billion that we've approved or that we returned the initial comments on and that never came back in for back check. We've identified 232 plans for which we, with total estimated construction costs of $1.5 billion, that started back check and didn't finish it. So, according to our own internal policies, IR A17, these projects should have been voided, and we need to work with you to identify, are you still moving forward with those, or are we actually voiding them? So externally, we haven't done a good job. We will be working to make these kind of automatic triggers in warnings that are flags that come up in eTracker so that we don't allow this, and so that we can have more project management type reporting being provided out of our tracking system and not just be an inactive database that we have. The importance here is that's $2 billion worth of projects that we devoted our time and resources to reviewing that didn't go anywhere. But then we also have, and since January of 2000, between January of 2007 and May 11th of this year, we've approved 10,800. Wait, before I go on to this one, the internal processing that we have is, our policy says we should have avoided them. We have one regional office that has no outstanding back check issues, and one that has fewer, and the rest of the problem is in 2 regional offices. So we will be using the metrics to correct our own operating problems, streamlining our processes and procedures, and making sure that we are taking this opportunity to fix everything that we're doing wrong too. This isn't to come back and claim the design professionals are taking too long. This is about identifying problems and fixing them, whether they're internal or external. So back to January of 2007 through May 11th of this year, we approved, stamped out 10,857 projects worth over $30.1 billion. 6,200 of those projects valued at $15.7 billion were approved and are reported in construction. 1,461 of those projects were access only, a service that we provide for state buildings. And we have 3,196 projects valued at $9.4 billion that aren't in construction. Now, as you can see, between OPSC's workload list, the unfunded list, and those that have apportionments already, there's a certain amount of that money there. But there are a lot of resources from DSA being devoted to plan review that isn't going anywhere, which is support for why we really need to be prioritizing the work that we're doing. These metrics demonstrate clearly that school districts are submitting a large number of construction plans that may never get built, and in order to streamline the process to everybody's advantage, we need to do maybe a better job of making sure that what you want us to focus our efforts on now are those that are really ready to be built. And I understand that there's also funding issues that come into play after you've started this process. So again, we just need to try to work together.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Kathy. Now we'll go ahead and open up questions for DSA, and then I think we'll take a short break after we conclude that, and come back and handle questions for the entire panel, and we'll be inviting Mr. Amos back up. So questions first from the audience. I've got several questions from some of our webcast participants as well, but we'll start here in the room. All right. Let's go here first. Question from a design professional. Lately, it's taking longer and longer to get certification letters from DSA. The project certification guide is a wonderful tool that aids the outside stakeholder in the closeout process. However, it appears to have limited flexibility and discretionary freedom of the district field engineer when determining if a project can be certified. Is this true, and could this be the reason for longer bin times for the certification letters? And I'm going to ask Craig Rush. Kathy?
The certification guide is intended to provide statewide consistency with NDSA's approach to certification and acceptance of alternate documents. If we're not following the guide or not accepting the alternates, then we need to be informed so that we can do something to ensure the consistency. We hear this all the time. It's inconsistent from regional office, between the regional offices, and if we don't know that it's being applied differently, there's not much that we can do about it. That's why some of the metrics will help, because it won't be up to somebody to report it to us. We'll be able to find it in the data. The number of reopenings of old uncertified projects has increased. I think partly because there's a focus now on modernization projects, which means you're now doing alterations to existing buildings, and you're finding out that you can't do anything on those because they were closed without certification. The highest priority is reserved for those that were closed with potential health and safety issues, and then we are committed to, and that's why we have a team at headquarters that's focusing on those. Within the regional offices, though, they certainly are one of their highest priorities to make sure that they are not impeding the ability to move forward with another shovel-ready project. So they're the second highest priority statewide, but at headquarters we're focusing on the Type 4, and at the regional offices they are encouraged to make sure that they treat those that are in the way of shovel-ready projects.
Okay, another question. We are also experiencing considerable delays in the review and approval of field change documents that require review by ACS and FLS. What can we do to help expedite this process? What is the current bin time for FCDs that require review by ACS and FLS?
Craig.
And if we could get a microphone for Craig, Craig will go ahead and help us with that.
I'm just wondering why I got elected to answer this question is all. I was just sitting there having a nice time. Yeah, I guess so. Thank you. Actually, I knew this question was going to be asked somehow. And so field change documents, FCDs, in the old days we called them PCOs, preliminary change orders, and now call them FCDs. They're intended to resolve minor field issues as they arise. So instead, we find that many times the architects are using the FCD process to resolve major deficiencies in either the design or the construction, and changes that are occurring in the field because of district program changes. So instead of the changes being made from programming prior to submittal of projects, some changes, more changes than we would expect, occur during the construction. And so they are actually become rather large changes. They're not really FCDs. FCDs are to fix small problems. Instead, they're design changes. And so they take longer than anyone would appreciate to check them, because they have significance, complexity, and magnitude. So what can everyone do to help, especially the construction and design community? Eliminate major changes by providing accurate construction documents. Ensure the construction documents accurately reflect the district's programming, and the district understands their programming before they execute the construction documents. Any value engineering, which is a good idea, but value engineering should occur prior to documents being submitted to DSA, so that we're actually plan checking what you intend and can afford to construct. And then changes that you submit that you know will take longer than maybe 2 or 3 hours for DSA to check, you need to understand that those are going to be checked slower, because we need to try to fit them in with your plan check projects, and they really should have been submitted prior to construction as revisions.
Thank you, Craig.
Don't go away. The next question's yours, too. There's a reason he's answering. It's not just because I choose to make him answer it. It is that I am an administrator, and the question that he's answering are really more appropriate for our architects and engineers that understand what's happening out there in the field. So, and he's very good.
But, Bill, you made a comment before that you can't flog people to perform. You might want to check with Kathy. Yes, you can. I won't tell you about Mr. Ramos, who was actually holding the other end of the cat o' nine tails. So, anyway, how may I help you?
Eric, you want to read the next question?
Well, yes, it would appear as though you had the questions even before I had the questions. So actually, if you guys want to go ahead and take it away, I don't want to skip around. Kathy, feel free to read the questions.
All right. We are experiencing considerable delays in review and approval of addenda and deferred approval items. Why can't these documents be back-checked over the counter? This would help cut down on the misunderstandings and the sending of drawings back and forth several times. So actually, after Craig answers from his more technical perspective and understanding what's happening in the field, I'll give you the bureaucratic answer on what we're doing to fix some of the problems.
Okay, so addenda deferred approvals, yeah. Why they take a long time, longer than they should, I agree. And we've partially cured some of the deferred approval issues by fire sprinklers no longer being deferred approval, by the way. And that, yeah. Thank you, Bill, and I will join you with that. That was a problem for all of us, it really was. And I think by the fire sprinkler deferred approval going away, a lot of the question about the time it takes to do deferred approval will go away because the other deferred approvals tend to go faster for whatever reason. But back checking them over the counter, and I don't know. I expected someone to clean up these responses after.
Don't read it. Answer it. You know the answer.
Look, okay. Yeah. The answer is that we plan check a set of deferred approval or addenda drawings, and we make comments on them. And we find that the comments are not responded to. And so we have a choice. We can send them back to you, whoever, and ask them to be responded to again and again and again until they are responded. Or you could come to back check, and at back check we can ask the person to respond to them. And then in our back check room, they can spend 1 or 2 days redesigning and drafting and responding to our comments. The difficulty is when it occurs in our back check room, we have staff in our back check room with them. Maybe not standing the entire time, but monitoring the situation. And so it's a tremendous drain on staff resources to stand in our back check room while other people are completing the designs that they should have completed at their office when they first received the comments. And that's the truth of the matter. So could we do a back check of these? Yes. Is it an effective use of our staffing resources? No. Not now. Could we come up with a model that it could work? Yes. And perhaps the model is if we find any one question, no matter how minor you didn't answer, you need to go home again. But, that doesn't make for good relationships in our back check room or anywhere else. So I welcome solutions to this problem because I personally would like to do addenda and deferred approval back checks.
Direction you want us to head so that we resolve your problems too.
I just wanted to follow up on the deferred approval issue because I think I'm going to speak again as a poor victimized school district. And remember that we are bound by the Public Contract Code. And under the Public Contract Code, we're not allowed, with certain exceptions of district standards, whatever, to require a specific product. We have to allow equals, et cetera. So there's issues regarding whether, so if we take deferred approvals, in typical deferred approval items, bleachers, a good example, bleachers, which take often almost as long as fire sprinklers to get approved by DSA. But we never, because of the Public Contract Code, and unless you go through the process to get the district to do a resolution, to allow you to only to sole source specify, you are a little bit at the mercy of the market about what kind of a product, what manufacturer you're going to get, and what the actual calculations, et cetera, are in that. So there's a structural problem that we need to solve working together, DSA and districts and design professionals, because to be frank, the interest of the district is that there would be no deferred approval items in the contract. All they do is delay and cost more money. And part of the problem that you're having is you're getting design professionals many times who are coming in under a subcontract who is has a very tight fee, is trying to get somebody for the $0 to come in and get something certified through DSA, or may not have a California license, may not have a California experience, and so you're getting many times things from out of state and just not at the quality that you would expect from a design professional like Steve, for example. And so, this is a structural problem that needs to go away for districts, because all this is doing is creating inefficiencies and extra cost and extra time in building schools. So, and it's something that we should all work together on. Deferred approval needs to go away. And design professionals need to design the systems, and we need to be able to have the flexibility to tell them, design the system in, engineer it up front, we'll pay the costs up front, because the actual costs up front are less than what we're paying now in terms of time, delay, and cost.
And I think Bill should answer the rest of the questions. That was a better answer than I had.
Yeah, I like your answer, Bill.
Yeah.
So the only answer that I wanted to add to what Craig's talking about, and he touched on a little bit, was customer service and what we're doing and how we respond. Some of the things that we've heard about the things going back and forth, we don't currently track that. All we track in our system is how long each plan reviewer took working on those things. We've recently migrated our e-tracker system, our project tracking system, to a new technology, and now we can actually start making some enhancements to it to do a better job of tracking some of the data that we don't currently capture that we would like to capture. But hearing from some of you on complaints about the number of times different documents go back and forth, one, we want to track that, but we also are working with staff to look at why they're going back, because we don't want them going back, or even if they are going back for the right reason, if our process is because you wrote something in the wrong shaded area, whatever, and it's really meaningless, we need to make sure that even if you note that that's not what, that we need to make sure that our focus is on those things that are relevant to the code approval or code compliance stamp that we're giving to the plan, and work with you to make sure that we just don't have you angry with us all the time because we nitpicked you on process, when what we're really interested in is making sure that we have a good project or product moving forward for both of us.
Yeah, and I see that. I see documents going back and forth because of some minutia that they should never go back and forth for. And I specifically agree with you on the bleachers, and there's not that many deferred approval items, and you think that together we could figure out how to approve bleachers more rapidly than we currently do. And count me in on looking for a solution with you on that one. Absolutely. I got to tell you, though, I saw a set of bleacher drawings the other day, just submitted that were not even to the 2007 California Building Code. They were 2001. It's like, oh, you're kidding me. Now what? But in general, yeah, bleachers seem to be, right after fire sprinklers, the next most complex issue to deal with. The only saving grace on bleachers is we don't see nearly as many of them as we see the fire sprinklers. Yeah, sprinklers.
And related to this, in terms of tracking the change orders and stuff, it will do a better job of helping us make sure that's one of the bottlenecks. It'll prove to you, one, that we know that we have this much work there and where we need to redirect our resources to. On the flip side, it gets to an issue that Department of Finance pointed out in the last audit they did, and that is that you should be tracking project-specific costs, and what it is, more so than what we just use the estimated cost right now that you're all used to paying. I think that what they're envisioning would be very difficult, but it did bring to our attention that, for example, just large districts that have architects and engineers on staff, they tend to make more change orders during the process. So when they're generating 4 and 5 times more change orders than other districts, that changes how much work or resources we have to devote to the changes that they're doing and the work that they're creating. It's another Eric thing. Well, it's hard to hide. Sorry. But in a sense, realistically, if you were to look at it like that, then the rest of you are subsidizing the amount of resources that we send to Eric. Sorry, Eric. No.
It's your turn.
But we should be keeping track of what it is and where it is, because to me, what it really means is that all of our regional offices can't be staffed identically because we have different things, and that's not the only problem. There are, I think in Craig's shop, somebody was complaining to me, well, I don't want to have to do back check all at once. I want to bring back my fire, life safety, and my access when I have them ready for back check. And Craig did an eloquent job of explaining why we can't do that, because when you get to the structural and then you have to go back and do changes on it anyway, that it might be the way that you like to do it, but it's not necessarily a cost-efficient or effective way of doing business, especially from our end. So all of those kind of things are part of why we need to capture the data and then figure out where the inefficiencies are and work together to fix them. And with that.
Thanks, Kathy. We've been going for about 2 hours. I'd like to give everybody a chance to get up, stretch, have a restroom break if you need to. I'd like to come back here about 3:05, and we will finish addressing some of the online questions that were submitted, and then open it up for other questions and hear some closing remarks from Stephen. Thanks. Started again. Before we finish the DSA questions and then take any other questions in our closing Q&A, I want to let everybody know, and apologize for not doing this earlier, especially for those folks that are watching online. The presentations can be found, both the presentations and the archive of this webcast, which will be available probably, it sometimes takes us a day or two to get the archive up. But those PowerPoints and the archive are available at www.dgs.ca.gov/townhall. So if you go there again, www.dgs.ca.gov/townhall, you'll be able to watch the archive of the webcast and take a look at the PowerPoint presentations. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Kathy, who's going to go ahead and go through, I believe we've got about a half dozen additional questions that were submitted to us previously and then also resubmitted to us today. That's the confusion that she and I had. So she's going to go ahead and read those questions, and we'll get those questions answered, and then we'll take additional questions from the room. Kathy?
Okay, so again, like last time, Craig will answer this question from his operating perspective, and then I will add more of what we're doing in response to it. But lately, we are experiencing more stringent intake review comments, even with the DSA 3 checklist. Many of the comments we are receiving used to be back check comments. Is this because of DSA's efforts to reduce the bin time?
The answer is no.
Thank you.
Yeah, a few years ago, we actually established the DSA Form 3 checklist in order to help people be more successful in submitting a complete set of plans. At that time, it was our thought that the checklist would be a mandatory submittal document. You sign it, the design professional was required to sign it and submit it. The design professionals weren't necessarily appreciating that requirement, so we backed off from it. And however, we found that the plans, too many plans were still coming in incomplete. So we, again, not that long ago, made the DSA Form 3 a mandatory submittal so that we basically forced the design professionals to use the checklist so that they could be more successful at giving us a complete submittal. So the question really, though, is that there's a perception we are being more stringent in order to reduce bin time. And so I think that leads to the question of, if we reject a set of plans, does that buy us time? And the answer, it doesn't really, because that same set of plans is just going to come back the next week or the following week. And if our comments are so minutia, then it should not take the architects their normal 30 or 45 days right now to resubmit the set of plans, so it should almost be the next day. So instead, it's an effort to require a complete set of plans so that the plans are not so that we don't accept incomplete plans to be used as placeholders in line, and so we are not completing our plan review during back check. If the information's not there at plan check, we can't make a plan check comment, so there's nothing to back check. Instead, we have to wait till we're at back check to make the plan check comment. Once we make a plan check comment at back check, because it's the first time we saw it, we get accused of adding additional comments to the set of plans. And so really the answer is to require a complete set of plans submitted at plan check time. Also, at back check, if we're doing plan check instead of back check, it takes more staff resources away, and we're trying to focus staff resources on actually approving plans in a timely manner and not spending forever in our back check room rechecking stuff that was never submitted in the first place. Hopefully that answered the question.
And we see lots and lots of legislation aimed at streamlining or expediting the plan review process through DSA. And the answer is always, well, we can't approve a plan until it's code compliant. No more, no less. And the most efficient way for the process to work is to have a complete and accurate plan submitted to us at the very beginning. That means we spend minimal time working on, we do the complete review required for all 3 disciplines, and then we return it to you and it's done. That's not the way most plans work. We end up doing back check, and so anytime it comes incomplete or all of the comments identified in back check are essentially rework or extra time that we're having to spend on any plan that comes into us. So we are trying to help with some of the things at the front end in the form to make sure that we've streamlined the process or to provided you a toolkit to know what needs to be there to make it a complete submittal. On the other hand, one of the things we heard separate from this comment is that we're returning them for frivolous reasons. So in hearing the concern that maybe we're returning them for frivolous reasons or being too nitpicky, we've actually requested a copy of all of the letters, and we're looking at them to make sure, because that's one area where we can reinforce it. We don't have to rely on you to come forward with yours and rat out a particular intake architect and say, he's being too frivolous or she's being too frivolous. We'll look at the letters. It doesn't appear to me that they're too frivolous because most of the parts that I've looked, the letters that I did look at, I have to go to an architect and an engineer and say, these are real reasons why they're being returned. But where we're headed with performance metrics, one of the options is similar to how you can click on a project to see where it is, where we're, in terms of what I'm talking about, we're doing with eTracker. When we reach the point where you can click on it and look at that bar chart that we had for your particular project, we could also make it arrangements to do full disclosure on why that project was returned for incomplete as an option. I'm not suggesting that we really go there, but it is possible so that it would be, if you want to know why they're being returned, we could make that available for all of you. Next question is, over the past 15 years, the certification process has become more complex. This is primarily due to the lack of adequate construction oversight in the field by DSA. To remedy the problem, DSA has created a multitude of safety nets to help ensure compliance. In the end, the architect is charged with the responsibility of providing DSA with a mountain of evidence or proof that all work was completed per the approved plans. What specific steps is DSA taking to have a stronger presence in the field and to streamline the certification process?
Let Dan answer that one. Tell him about the pilot, what our plans are.
Yeah, in terms of the stronger presence in the field, we started a pilot a couple years ago in the Sacramento Regional Office. In addition to having structural engineers visit the projects during construction, which has been traditionally the case, we also have construction supervisors visiting the project to oversee the primarily non-structural portions, the fire access and mechanical, electrical, and plumbing portions of the projects. So we've been doing that, and The intent is, I think, to roll that out eventually to all of the regional offices, which would give us a stronger presence in the field. We want to, part of their charge, too, will be to, for both the construction supervisors and the field staff, would be to pay more attention to the whole closeout process and some of the things that are missing, and work with the project inspector to make sure the documents that are required for us to certify a project are collected during construction. So we don't get to the end right at the end of construction. So we don't get to the end and we're missing a whole bunch of documents, or it's determined 6 months or a year later, whatever, when everyone's gone, that these documents are missing and people are no longer around to supply them. So we are going to try to work with the project inspector and our enhanced field staff to put an emphasis on project certification. Some of the other things I think we're looking at now that were mentioned during the PowerPoint are potentially streamlining the whole certification process. We understand and realize it's complex, and it maybe has changed. The construction industry has changed over the years since the original legislation and regulations were written, and looking at some things that maybe are no longer required. You know, what are the minimum things we can require or that are necessary in order for DSA to say, yes, the buildings were built in accordance with the approved drawings, which is the whole reason for certification, so that we can issue you a certification letter. So we are looking at ways to streamline that, and I think there's going to be opportunities for more input from districts and architects as we move forward to give us your ideas. I think David mentioned, four different things, maybe having the architect or engineer be involved in doing certain steps to certify some of these old projects that have closed without certification. So,
we were looking to require production of certification documents at various milestones in the construction process. I think Craig and Dan both walked me some great examples of when you would need these documents, and then you're not looking for them at the end when the process is all done. It also prevents you from allowing anything to be, one of the things we're looking at now when we look at a project file, an old one, is notes that there was deficiencies or problems and concerns, but by the time we're looking at it, this project is done. Moving forward, we have some things in place that will prevent some of that with the stop work orders and different things that we have now more recently been doing. So going forward, we want to continue to refine that to make sure that we're only collecting those documents that we absolutely have to have, and more importantly, some of the things that we're talking about changing in our tracking system is making sure that we know that we have all these documents and that we work to commit to some sort of turnaround time on the review and approval of change orders and FCDs and different things. So again, performance metrics being used to make sure that we're performing or monitoring where we're performing and continuing to work to provide better service. The next question is, I understand DSA is in the process of upgrading the DSA tracker. Can you share what specific changes the outside stakeholder will see when this upgrade is incomplete? We're actually getting ready to roll out the new tracker system, I think, on Monday. And for the most part, it's going to look just like the old tracker system until we start making some changes to the data and fields that we want to start tracking. And then internally, we will be applying some more management tools to it so that it gives us alarms, basically, when certain time period. For example, on the back check, if we've returned your project for comment, then it should automatically tell us when 6 months is up. Now, whichever plan reviewer is responsible for that project needs to know, or the supervisors, I don't know who will have the warnings go to, but so that we make sure that there's a warning in there that they need to send a letter to the school district to remind them you either need to request an extension or we need to talk about voiding the project. The next question is, please explain the pros and cons of the access-only review for K-12 projects.
Let's see. There are a few projects on K through 12 that could qualify for access-only plan review, and a typical K through 12 project is governed in statute by the Field Act, which is really a structural safety act. but there are projects that don't fall within the Field Act, but still fall within Government Code Section 4450 through 4454, I think, are the ones, which is that DGS reviews the accessibility component of the project. And so a perfect example would be replacing natural turf with an artificial turf on your football field and an all-weather track. So there's nothing structural on there, but you are required to submit it to DSA for at least access plan review. Our statutory authority, though, in Government Code Section 4450 authority, is limited to plan review. There's no construction phase authority. There's no construction oversight then by DSA. And so therefore, your project will never become DSA certified. So, so what does that mean? I'm not too sure exactly legally what it means, but what it really means is that in order to do an artificial track and turf, you may need to upgrade your parking, let's say. So now all of a sudden, your upgraded parking that you just paid for is not DSA certified. Now you want to add a restroom building at your football field. We're going to tell you, show that you have compliant parking, right? Well, you just did your parking, but it's not DSA certified, so you need to, again, draw the same plans, submit them to DSA, and then it becomes a field verification issue in order to get that parking certified. So let's see. So the pros. The pros are it costs less money if you do an access-only review. You don't pay as much fees to DSA. And the con is there's no construction oversight and there's no project certification. How do you get around this? Well, you could pay us full service fee. You could pay the structural portion of the fee, even though there's no structural components to review. Our structural engineers look at the plans. I think they count the sheets or something, and then you receive a complete DSA approval, and there's a field component that goes with it. Your project can be certified at the end.
Or we might need a legislative fix to make sure that there's a better solution.
Well, the real solution is to have a field component to go along with the access. That's, in my opinion, the absolute correct solution.
So we need a legislative fix to allow us to collect the fee that we need to do the field oversight piece of it, so that we're not providing the service for free, but also that you then have that you're not paying for a structural review that you don't need or a fire and life safety review that you don't need, but you do pay for the services provided for your construction oversight and your closeout and certification. So we'll put that on our list to fix. And then the final question is, with the suspension of the EDOC pilot and the mandatory project electronic review of $400,000 or less project review, is DSA still committed to going paperless?
Yes.
We are still committed to going paperless. However, in these economic conditions, first, with trying to stimulate the economy and expedite our plan review, we wanted to do whatever it was that we could to make it as painless as possible to get your projects into us. We also have a potential legal issue of mandating that it be all projects under $400,000 being electronic, to the extent that a small architectural firm does still hand draw their projects, or even if they don't hand draw them but don't do a lot of electronics. We'd have to look at having some exceptions to doing that, and even DSA is limited in terms of, do we have enough computer expenditure authority to make sure that all staff have the computer capacity that we need to be able to do full electronic plan review. But we're going to continue to move in that direction.
Yeah, when I became the state architect, that was one of my goals, and maybe 5% towards the goal right now. So it may not happen by the end of 2010, but somewhere out there.
Those are all the questions we had from our online participants, and can we take more questions from the room?
I just wanted to kind of go back on the closeout thing one more time and just reflect. I mean, I think I really appreciate the efforts you're taking to come up with some streamlined pieces to allow architect engineer certification. I think you've been listening. And unfortunately, in our district, we have hundreds of portables that have never been certified. Class size reduction, they just threw them in. Let's be honest, okay? And it's not worth it for us to certify them. And we may never do that. We don't believe that the liability issues related to those are, or to the board's liability is the same that the state architect may think. But it's just not worth it, not worth the trouble. It would be thousands and thousands of dollars of time, staff time, and your time for something that any kind of real risk is so marginal to be negligible. But so older projects, the problem with older projects is that what I'm hearing you say is you're essentially going to hold school districts hostage again in the plan check process when we go back to do a modernization. And I've been held hostage once by DSA on one closeout, and I had to do a project, and it took 4 months and $8,000, to get something certified that had been finished, that had been fully inspected and completed, and had approved plans and everything back in 1998, and this was last year. It's not a happy process, and it just at a time like this when we're trying to get projects on the street to hold us hostage doesn't make sense. It flies in the face of what we're hearing from the other side. And
we mentioned earlier that we're looking at solutions to streamline and to simplify and to, Craig doesn't like this word, but grandfather certain types of projects. And we've already started in terms of some steps that we think we can do. We may need some regulations or some possible legislation. But the key is that we want to make sure that whatever we do, the building is safe. Now, that may be minimal, it may be more than you would like, but we have to keep them safe. But we do want to and will come up with some streamlined, simplified process for these types of situations.
I would like to speak to, and I'd like to respond to this because it has been a consistent message, Bill, throughout all of our town hall forums. Many jurisdictions are struggling with modernization, and the closeout certification process at a time when districts are struggling with money remains a constant barrier. I've had the opportunity to meet with specific groups. I've met, of course, with school districts. I've met with the community college districts. I've met with a large variety of people, including the leadership of CASH, and the message is consistent. What we have to do and what we're looking to find is not only grandfathering provisions that ensure the safety, but at the same time streamline the process and find ways in which there are too many things that we've done simply because we've done them forever, and they don't make sense. And we all acknowledge that. The details of that have not yet been released, but again, we plan on putting forth some of those things for public comment. But I do want to share with you that what you're articulating is very consistent across the board. And I have met with, I can't even tell you how many people at this point who have shared that very same concern with us, and we hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Again, Richard Gonzalez of Richard Gonzalez and Associates. One question I could pose to DSA is there a way to have your DSA letter available online to be printed up as an as-needed basis for purposes of filing various applications? The second part of it is more of a combination question between OPSC and DSA. Is the application program process requires we give a DSA approval letter as part of our application document. And that information that's on that letter is no different than what's on the project tracker that you have on your system. And yet we are still required to provide you with a letter which is easily accessible by your staff on the system, which may preclude the use of and the need of a letter for purposes of filing an application. Is there some way to maybe make all that work within the agency?
Hopefully, yes. Again, we haven't talked a whole lot about how we're trying to work closer together between DSA and OPSC and CDE as well, because we have 3 agencies that are dealing with the same clients. So the more that we can work together, have common systems, and be more electronic, the easier it's going to be for us, the easier it's going to be for you. And I think your suggestion in terms of the letter is a good one.
And I think in response to that issue, I mean, just like DSA is evaluating their systems in place, I mean, and OPSC needs to do obviously the same thing, is reevaluate the process we have. I mean, the process has been there for years. not to disrupt the process, but make it more efficient. And, hearing your comments, and obviously those things are probably touching the regulations and a requirement, but, those are things we definitely want to look at. And, if we can collapse some things to make it easier, that's definitely the goal. So thank you for your ideas.
I think one of the ideas also already in the works is to make sure that DSA's e-tracker system does a better job of documenting the types of projects that are coming in, whether it's modernization, new construction, additions, all of that, so that we can help OPSC do a better job of being able to predict where their workload demands are going to be, and or CTE project. Oh my gosh, the last couple of months we've had lots of questions about where are the CTE projects and have they been approved and which round are they for, and so to the extent that we have that kind of information readily available so that we can give you feedback on where they are in DSA's process and when they're going to be hitting OPSC's doorstep, we need to be communicating better on that.
I want to follow up on what Richard said and what I heard, Lisa, where you were kind of heading, and I have to give credit to DSA for being really out front about and really responding to a lot of concerns in terms of analyzing their own processes in a rigorous way. And it strikes me that they're out ahead of where your agency is. And I don't mean to, in a bad way, but I would really hope that for the sake of the overall program, that you are going to be engaging in the same analysis of your performance and your metrics, because our perception, frankly, is that you've slowed down your review time significantly, and things are not being processed in very timely fashion at OPSC, and it's difficult, especially when we're hearing that all of a sudden it's all our fault because we're not coming in for fund releases, to have you guys, I mean, I have things that are still, the processing times are increasing, we think. So, and then maybe you need one of those charts that Kathy has, right, that shows it's really my fault or my consultant's fault that it's not in there. But I guess on a serious note, I hope that you will be engaged in a similar process. And if what I would like to see, and I think what districts would like to see, is that the agency, OPSC's resources, are put into processing applications and not dinging us for things and auditing us in ways that we don't think we need, that we're already being audited locally. But put your resources into getting the money out and not into trying to penalize districts and going after us.
Bill, I'd like to respond to that, because I think I've heard that stated in many different ways, not as succinctly as you articulated it. I can tell you what my mandate was from the very beginning. The governor said, move money, get shovels into the earth, create jobs, and ensure safe schools. That was my mandate. The reality of it is that this has been something that you can't look at by looking at one element of it. You have to look at the continuum. And clearly what you're articulating is the continuum of focus has to be that we're looking at every aspect along the way, creating performance metrics and identifying through transparency where those roadblocks are and what the bottlenecks are. Just as we started this dialogue about bin time, it was unacceptable. This is unacceptable. We have to do a better job of processing, managing, and communicating where we are and demonstrating that through transparency. I appreciate your gracious comments about DSA, because I truly see major improvement in that level of accountability, their ability to communicate effectively about where things are and share without blame where we are in the process. The performance metrics for us is an opportunity for us to identify through data where the real problems are, less anecdotal, but more substantively, what are the steps we can do to change them. OPSC has not had that rigor of inquiry, and that's what we need to do. And that's the commitment that my staff have to moving in that direction. And again, this wasn't something that we did internally. This came from the very top. Time to make sure that we are doing everything we can to move the money out there, create efficiencies, identify these roadblocks, get rid of the red tape, and make it happen. But in the absence of performance metrics, and we heard earlier about comments about, how do we become better consumers, or how do we become better service-oriented, or how do we whatever.
The reality of it is it's the data that tells us where the problems are and what resources. When I get complaints, the first thing I want to know is whose desk it's on, how long has it been there, I want a post-mortem. And that's what we have to be able to do on every case, is look at it and say, this was good, this was not so good, and we're not going to ever repeat that again. And so I appreciate your comments, Bill, but I think that OPSC has yet to meet that standard, and we're going to continue to strive to do that.
If I could just add to that, Stephen, I think that, first of all, thanks, Bill, and we welcome suggestions and your input in terms of improving the process. What I do want to point out is that we have initiated that process in terms of looking at our resources and shifting our resources to address a fluctuating workload. Some of you may know that we just did sort of a reorganization. We moved some teams around, different counties. You may see that. If you haven't, you will. But it was a first step to evaluate where the workload is within the regions. What teams, what counties has more projected workload on our books now, and then looking ahead in terms of anticipating districts that have remaining eligibility, districts that have passed local bonds, and anticipate applications being submitted. So we started moving staff around to address some of those needs. So we were taking the first steps, first of many, to improve our process internally as well.
And Michelle from Marysville School District, just wanted to reiterate once again what Bill and all of you have been saying. As an example, we submitted 2 projects in early January. I just got my 15-day letter 2 weeks ago. So that's 5 months that it's been sitting in there. I also just released, I was lucky enough to be on the unfunded list to get funded. I submitted my 5005 the day after the SAB meeting last month. I just received notice a few days ago from the project manager that I'd forgotten my PIW. So that tells me that OPSC didn't look at my 5005 for over 3 weeks, which if we're trying to move money out, that's disheartening for districts, because that's 3 weeks of time that my 5005 got lost somewhere. And, you know, obviously it was my fault that I forgot a PIW, but I could do that in an hour, and I turned that around the next day. So just going through a process like DSA had would definitely be beneficial. And then just for DSA, on those access-only projects, we do a lot of parking lots, and those also fall under access-only. And that does come back to kind of kill us when we come back for a building project and we're using those DSA application numbers. I know that we do have to turn in a final expenditure report to DSA for those access-only projects. If somehow instead of sending out a certification letter, but on the project tracker, if you could just post that we've submitted that and that you've received it, because oftentimes we send it in and then we go back and verify and DSA says, well, we never got it. So if you could just add that onto your project tracker to show us that there's nothing more that we need to submit to DSA for those projects, that would be helpful.
Jenny Burnham again with Santa Rosa City Schools. On the OPSC, I wanted to also just ring true with what the other two were saying, is that, you know, we'd really like to see the auditing of the documents that we submit taper down a little. I feel like I have to fight tooth and nail for every penny that I ask for, and I have to justify why it's a health and safety issue. I'm speaking specifically to the ERP grants. And it's frustrating to have to fight for money when you're doing it for the low decile campuses that need the things the most. And we're talking playgrounds and asphalt and paint. And it's absolutely frustrating to have to go in and justify every single penny and to determine whether the people I have reviewing the safety issues are in fact qualified to be doing that. And then to be denied an application for things that previous applications were, you know, I basically had 3 playgrounds that were approved, 1 playground that they were going to deny that had the exact same information as the 3 previous, and I made them go back and pull those files, and they actually approved it, which I was greatly appreciative for. But again, it was a 3-week process where I had to fight for money for the schools that deserve it the most. So, you know, implementing some streamlined procedures for that would be hugely beneficial, because then it's less time that I'm fighting for money.
Can I comment? On
Yes.
the emergency repair program that you're referencing it's kind of a front-end request. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a level of rigor that in order to get the grant, that there's some validation that's performed at the front. And so, I mean, I understand that there is a team reviewing those documents, and there are certain requirements that you have to meet in order to establish that grant. But if you have certain issues that you want to address to any particular level of manager, feel free to give us a call so we can try to resolve some of those issues for you.
They've always been extremely helpful. Again, it's just I feel like we're fighting against each other instead of working collaboratively together sometimes. And I'd love for there to be a collaboration of what's right, because I think somebody said it at the beginning, that we lose sight of we're doing this for kids. We're all here for one purpose, and it's for students. And that gets lost in all the paperwork and all of the money and all of the bureaucracy. And we're all here for kids. And I think that needs to be our number one priority.
Jane, I think it's very well stated, and I think the crux of it is that we can all say that, but until we get to the point of measuring what we do and what its value, we can move to opposite ends of the spectrum, and that's what happens. This process for us is about taking a walk in your shoes. It's about what I call 180 thinking, and I talk to the managers about. We see it one way because of the mandates that we perceive that may or may not be the best representation of regs, laws, or other things. But simply because we see it this way doesn't make it right, doesn't make it the best way to do things. And as we started this dialogue, it is about finding efficiencies. It's about looking internally at what we can collectively do better to move money faster and ensure safe schools. And at the end of the day, much like what you heard Kathy talk about, the absence of consistency in code reviews was not, you can't capture that until you start doing performance metrics. And then you can look at it and say, well, why is it this way for this customer and that way for another customer? And then we can train to that, because I think that's an integral part of it. You should get the same answer no matter who you send your application to, and it should meet and comport with the same timelines. Kathy spoke to, at the DSA level, about workload balancing. That is if one district, one region, one office has a problem, that needs to be redistributed so that it's simply not an overload in one area. We heard from David talk about these peak periods in which all of a sudden you got $1 billion project that wasn't staffed for or predicted. Well, we have to be able to shift that workload. And that's what we've done with DSA, is we have redirected staff where they're needed, and they're building up their performance metric area. Much like what Bill said earlier, we have to do the same thing in OPSC. You have to be able to do quick and dirty analysis on a day-to-day basis to know where you stand and where we need to shift resources in these tight times. So thank you for your comments, because I think they're right on the mark.
Thank you. And I just want to say one more thing, just to go back to closeout. I know it's probably the district's biggest struggle right now. I mean, my district.
It's our favorite subject.
It's my favorite subject. We have, I'm kind of asking a unique question. We have 55 projects that we've calculated that we have without certification, and 98% of those were done prior to me even being out of high school. So, yay me. So what I would like to know is, where do we go from here? I mean, I'm committed to trying to obtain closeout. I mean, 2 of my campuses we don't have certification on the entire campus. I mean, technically, when it was built, it was never certified. And so I don't even know where to begin with that. I mean, I've hired the testing agencies to go out and do the review of the documents that, where do we go from here? Because basically my next step is deconstruction and opening up walls to retest stuff, and that's not going to happen.
Let me
can't.
start. Let me start, and I feel your frustration. I really do. And you're not the only one. There's a lot. And I mentioned this task force that's working on trying to deal with some of these issues. We're going to move fast on that task force and try to come up with some streamlined methodologies very quickly. In the interim, I would suggest that you talk to the Oakland office specifically and get someone, Kathy can work with you, or Frank, and identify an individual at that office that can kind of help you through this process and keep you informed of the changes as we make them, and move towards closure.
What I would like to add to that is that I had the benefit of spending about 3 hours with the community college districts and hearing the same challenges they were having with the closeout issues. I've heard it from LA, I've heard it from Bangor, I've heard it everywhere. It's the same issue. What is clear to me, though, is that what is clear to me is that we can't take a passive approach, that we have to take a collaborative approach. And to that end, I think it speaks to 2 things. That going forward, we really need to expand upon the collaborative approaches that we have started and include comprehensive performance metrics as we do that. But also, we're going to have to allocate staff to work on a liaison relationship to resolve those. And I'm very interested in how, and this is what I'm hoping this task force will identify for us, can I redirect staff that can go work with the districts and help identify streamlined processes, shortcuts, and other efficiencies to reduce this, because it's unacceptable. I mean, it's a fact. It serves us no purpose to stand in our current position and say, well, we have 12,000 of these out there, and oh well, when the school district needs money, they'll fix the problem. It's not the school district's problem. It is a collective problem that we have to deal with. So I envision, just like we did with DSA, is that we will, through this task force approach, with the school district's involvement and the various support of organizations that are present, that we will be able to identify how we can rededicate some resources to focus exclusively on the closeout issue and move this more efficiently. But I don't think it won't happen simply by a plan. It's going to require staffing and support to implement that plan. And it's going to have to be a collaborative one. It can't be bore exclusively by the districts.
And I appreciate that, truly. And we, Santa Rosa City Schools, would like to do whatever we can to ensure, a successful process. And we'd like to come to the table and have those discussions with you, specifically myself, because 55 projects at 23 campuses, I, at this point, cannot do anything without having to go all the way up through the top and beg and plead for projects to thank you very much for approving my project, by the way.
Answers to.
Thank you.
Project closeout and certification is my favorite topic. So, I think that my personal opinion about project certification is I think we should approach it from the concept that the building is probably just fine. Really, it's DSA approved. It was inspected. So I would like to approach it from the attitude of this building's probably okay. Now, what's the minimum we need to reach that next little step to assure the citizens in the state that it's okay? And so just throwing things out there right now, it's like, well, what if you hired an engineer that said it was okay? And what would I do? I would ask, well, did you look at the files? Yeah. Did you do any testing that you needed to do? Well, yeah. And, well, okay, do you think it's okay? Yeah. Well, maybe it's okay. And maybe that's a path we could explore. So anyway, stay tuned. Like David said, let's get together in the same room, throw ideas out, and then, like everything else, is here's some ideas. What's the problems with them, and then what's the solutions? Are the problems real? Are the solutions real? And what areas do we have commonality? And then execute those areas.
While that process is being worked out, Santa Rosa City Schools here saying we're willing to work with you. We want to do these things. Is there going to be flexibility with the projects we currently have in the pipeline? I have 2 CTE grants in the pipeline, one at one of the schools that doesn't have closeout, and you guys won't stamp it out because I don't have campus closeout of the entire campus. So how does that work? And I have a December 10th deadline.
Priority are those that we know that have potential health and safety issues.
Okay.
For anything else that's holding, any project that's holding up some other project that's ready to go forward, like a CTE project, then you just need to put it on our radar so that we can assign resources to help make sure that
It's
we
on the
work
radar.
with you to, what's that?
It's on the radar. We got the priority 1 status. We've already got the plans back. We've provided our comments. We literally cannot get stamp out because the campus itself.
Who are you working with?
I don't know the plan checker's name, but I'll find out.
Okay, talk to Nat specifically.
Okay.
And tell him what your situation is, and then we'll work together to come to a solution.
Yeah, because now I just found out that they'll give me my money, so I'm ready to go.
If I can just make one more comment, sorry. I just for your specific project, or for anyone else's, I don't know if you've read DSA IR A20.
Not recently.
Okay, read it, all right? Because it may have the answer that you're looking for. So DSA IR A20. And it clearly defines how uncertified projects may or may not affect your new projects. And it may be that there's a exactly, not necessarily loophole, but yeah, you can call it whatever you want. I think you may find your answer in there, or find a path to your answer.
This is kind of shift back from closeout just to the Crossroads piece a little bit, and then I can give you guys a chance to close up too. It strikes me that we're dancing around about a lot of minor issues when the big picture is we have 3 agencies tasked with approving school construction projects and modernization projects that are in their own silos, okay? And they don't talk to each other a lot. This is good. Okay, I got it. We're doing it more here. There's an agency missing. We need to reinvent the way we do this in some ways if we're going to be nimble and efficient and cost-effective, and we probably need to be able to have that discussion in relationship to how we're going forward with a new bond or how we fund it. I mean, just at the simplest level, there's not even a single application number. In other words, I can't use a DSA application number. That's different than your application number. That's crazy. I mean, so anyway, there are many things that need to be combined. Why isn't there just a single agency of CDE, OPSC, and DSA that receives the preliminary plans that are checked by CDE and approved in the beginning, like a zoning approval at your local building department, and then it goes through the design process and is completed and gets checked by DSA in the same agency, and then comes out and goes in for funding and moves over to another desk or another computer, hopefully, not paper, and then goes out the door and it's sent to the state allocation board for funding or whatever it is. I guess that we need to get there. We're talking about a lot of minutia here when we really need to focus on the big picture of doing things more efficiently, doing things together as the agencies, and creating some streamlined process for us to build schools.
Well, Bill, probably unlike my colleagues here, I can say that definitively it would be better. There is no question that having these isolated offices and the various components that go with them and the absence of interface, I've had people ask me, why are we diminishing the lines between DSA and OPSC? And the first question I have to ask myself, what universe do you live on? The reality of it is that you have to put these pieces together because at the end of the day, you, as the customer, don't care about whether it's this office or that office or what other offices are out there. The reality of it is particularly in these economic times, a lot of these systems were not created with the long term in mind. They were simply created and did not recognize what the long-term implications would be. We need to cut our administrative costs, we need to integrate our systems, we need to streamline our systems, and we need to move money faster. The administrative overhead is too high. The cumbersome nature of what we do is not appropriate. The intentions are good. The history is long, but it's going to be up to us to change it. And I do hear significant support in the administration for us recreating how we do this business. And I do think that this is a topic in good currency. And I would agree with you, Bill, that we can spend a whole lot of time talking about what bin time is today versus what it was 19 years ago. The reality of it is bin time is such a small piece of the larger minutia that it overwhelms the bigger picture, which is we're not moving money, resources, and in some cases not necessarily enhancing the safety of our children either. We've got systems that, in my opinion, really need to be changed. So for us, this is a starting point. I think one of the advantages I was given is that I cannot look at just one part of the system because I'm responsible for both. I also think that when I hear decisions that are being made or processes that the staff are engaged in that are not interfaced, it troubles me greatly. So all the points you're making are right on the mark. I think we really do need to take a look at what future organizational structure makes the most sense moving forward, and that's what we're invested in, however that be configured.
Question?
We had some fairly significant and frustrating issues with our construction project, and I was fortunate enough to bring those to your attention at the town hall meeting in Oroville, and very impressed with the responsiveness, and I think both in terms to our specific issues to help move our project along, and I think for other districts and similar, help streamline your operation and and your operational effectiveness. My problem is at this point though is with all those things aside, I can't get money moving if I don't have money. And I wanted, I had a couple specific funding questions. One is, I think Lisa alluded earlier to some possible bond passage movement in the fall. I wanted to see if I get more specificity on that. And I guess secondarily, if we are looking at other funding models to get money moving, and we've been looking at some bridge funding options, for instance. For us to try to bridge fund a project as a financial hardship district, we would have to have some idea as to when we would get the money and how long we'd have to bridge the funding for. I don't know what the feasibility of that, but if you could address those two things, I would appreciate it.
I know in the fall, in the budget letter, they actually specify a particular amount for each of the infrastructure bond programs. And if you look really closely to that, they have somewhat of a set aside of what the goal is for this bond program. And it's a pretty large volume. It's in the area of over $900 million. That's something they project as hopefully going out for this program, but obviously there are no guarantees to that $900 million, although they have that scheduled. As far as scheduled in 2011 and in the spring and the fall, I didn't see anything lined in there. But it's not to say that they're not going to evaluate it every 6 months, because that's the goal, is Department of Finance will evaluate it every 6 months. So in terms of, I hope that answers your first question.
Actually, before you go on with that, Finance is always going to redo their projections, and we have a catch-22 on the bond funds in terms of what they may or may not sell in specific areas, because if the money isn't flowing out in the program, then they may be looking at, well, maybe we should be looking at selling bonds in other areas where the money is moving. Not that I don't have any information into it. I'm just telling you that having worked at Finance, you're going to revisit those projections and the need to justify why you're going to sell bonds in particular areas. So if there's bond funds that are being used in other infrastructure areas, and we have $2 billion sitting at OPSC that's trickling out the door, there's some motivation for looking realistically at figuring out what to do with that, the pilot, some of the other options that are being considered right now for moving money out of OPSC in different format than has historically been done.
Correct. And, we're also realize, too, that, even with this board, we'll process another $1.7 billion in unfunded approvals. So even if we think big picture, and if everything is rosy and our funds are liquidated, and even if we do receive $900 million plus for the sake of it, we're still behind. We would still be $800 million short today if we see those monies today. So, we'll still continue to process our unfunded approvals, but we're always going to be behind a cue ball, because the way our system is set up right now, it's just the fluid market is only selling bonds in the fall and the spring. So our next opportunity is the fall.
I think the important thing here is the opportunity that you all have to participate in the discussion and the decisions that are made about the pilot because to the extent that you move that money out, it gets spent, projects are built, the economy is done. Even if you're reimbursing the projects you've already built, it now frees up money at the local level to come in and move some of the projects that are sitting on the queue with apportionments that need to go out the door. So now you have the local money that you need to move forward with yet another project, and it starts this cycle of getting things moving. So you really need to be aware of what's happening with those options and weigh in on where you're going with that to help make sure that the discussion that finance and the treasurer's office and all the important parties that are going to be negotiating and deciding what bonds to sell in September, you have an opportunity to help influence that.
Yeah, and we are shovel ready. My shovel's ready in the office right now. But I guess the second question is, are there other bond sources or other fundings that are underutilized? And the reason I ask this question is we're a financial hardship with two projects. One is new construction and one is modernization. I'm told that our modernization money is going to be much more readily available and available much sooner than the new construction money, yet the modernization is predicated upon the new construction because the modernization is taking place is contingent upon us building the new building, and then our modernization follows in that. So has there been any look at looking at other underutilized or other funding sources or other programs where there's money that's not been utilized and trying to reallocate and reshuffle some of that around?
And you bring up a good point, because I think one of the presentations, the slides we showed earlier, there's nearly $1.5 billion in modernization authority that's still there. And then as far as critically overcrowded schools, there's nearly $600 million that's parked in 1D as well. So there's still authority there, and I know that's a big question of, right now the way the bond is set up now, it's by the voters approved and it's for these specific programs. It's probably a bigger discussion for the administration or the legislature to figure out the flexibility of moving funds around. But currently the way it stands out, we have no flexibility in moving those funds around. But obviously that's a bigger level discussion than us here in the room.
And they are having those discussions. And there's a bill that was introduced this year to transfer some money from the overcrowded relief grant to the career technical education. It's going through the legislative process. People are thinking about it. People are talking about it. But these are broader policy decisions that have to be made at the Capitol with the administration.
And that require a 2/3 vote because they're changing what was set up in that proposition and then the legislation passed.
Other questions in the room? Got a question from one of our online participants for DSA. Question is, what are Kathy and David going to do to change the attitudes of staff by getting them to support your new direction?
Flog.
Actually, interestingly enough, one of the things that we're doing is sort of change management. That is, DSA has often been fixed with the blame for all that ails the plan review and the timelines associated with it. I suspect when a lot of staff become aware of what we're posting on the web and what we're doing with metrics, that gives them some pride in coming to work and seeing how quickly they're processing plans or that they're adding some transparency to the overall process, and that we're working in the direction of resolving bottlenecks and helping recognize for some of them that are frustrated is 1 minute they're working on plan reviews and then everybody's complaining because we're we're behind on change order processing, and the idea that the metrics will help us move forward to the Department of Finance and justify adding additional staff. There's lots of ways that once they understand what we're doing, that it will be to their benefit, performance metrics and some of the things that we're trying to do to give them a place that they can be proud of being part of DSA. I think there's a lot of pride in that no student has been injured in a DSA-approved building. I don't mean from an earthquake or any kind of structural damage. So I think they're very proud of that, but the recognition of the work that they're doing is often overshadowed by the reputation that DSA is too slow, and that doesn't mean that we don't have a really big pool of very talented and dedicated staff, and I think that when they start realizing that we recognize that, it'll help the culture change to one of a positive, be proud of where they're working.
Let me cut. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I would just like to say that I have been impressed with the staff at DSA, and I think it is a lot about change management. We are stepping outside the parameters and saying, you don't get to operate autonomously. What's on your desk is something that we work through, we collectively agree upon, and we measure. That's really important because people tend to pick and choose what they like to do or don't like to do. They fall into systems and processes that may or may not be effective. The benefit of our performance metrics is it identifies for us where our resources need to go to serve the customer. Because our number one mandate is to serve you. That's what we're here to do. And to that end, we have to redirect some days our workflow, our processes, our variety of things. So I guess what I'm saying is that I do believe over time people will see the value and the merit of all the changes that are taking place. I think we are seeing it externally. Internally, we're getting those type of comments, but I do think that it is change management, and I do know that it's challenging. I encourage the DSA staff, bear with us. We're revising, we're modifying, we're hearing, we're getting feedback, and to that end, take pride in what we're accomplishing here. But again, at the end of the day, it really does come down to serving you best. How do we best serve you so that you get continuity of message when you go to any regional office? When it comes to code interpretation, it's not left to one versus another. It simply should be relatively uniform with rare exception, and you should get a consistent level of service. You shouldn't have to figure out what day of the week you're going to the office to meet with what plan reviewer to determine whether or not you're going to get what kind of service you're going to get. That's an unacceptable answer. So while I am sensitive to the morale and the sensitivity of the highly skilled people at DSA, I also encourage them to look to the larger mandate that we all have, which is to serve. So with that, I do appreciate the many efforts. David, of course, wants to chime in here because he's always talking about morale.
To compliment the DSA staff. I think they are fantastic. They are professionals. We have over 100 senior structural engineers, over 50 senior architects. They do a great job. They need the recognition. They need the pat on the back. But I think one of the most important things we can do is involve them in the development of this process and these changes. They need to be part of it. We're talking to you about this. We're involving you. We need to involve our staff in the same fashion because they have ideas just like you do. They see it from a different perspective. And I think as we move into these different areas, we'll do more of that, and I think that will help with the change management.
Are there any more questions in the room? Okay, real quickly, I'd like to remind folks of the web address I gave you earlier, dgs.ca.gov/town hall. You can get the webcast archive there as well as the PowerPoints. This URL up here is actually, we do webcasting for other state government agencies. You can go to that address, also find the archive. But what you can also find there are archives of the SAB meetings that we webcast, the implementation committee meetings that we webcast. They're contained there. Finally, I'd like to interject just my own comment here. DGS feedback at dgs.ca.gov. These venues have been great opportunities to air some of these major issues and get a dialogue going. But I know oftentimes you're frustrated with these issues at the time you're dealing with your funding request, dealing with your plan review, and perhaps don't want to disrupt that process by sort of bringing those issues out during that process with those staff. This is a great place where you can get those questions. They come into our public affairs office, and we're charged with dealing with all constituent issues for the department. Bring your issue to us, and we can work with OPSC staff, DSA staff. We can bring Stephen and the director in if necessary to help deal with some of these bigger picture issues and get some visibility on them. So please feel free to send anything along to that address. And also we welcome any comments or feedback that you might have for us on today's session or the other town halls, what you got out of it, what was useful, what you'd like to see in the future. With that, I'll invite Stephen up to make some closing remarks.
Again, I would like to thank everyone here in the room that has taken the time out of their busy schedule to come meet with us today and give us the feedback that you've given. Also for those that nearly 100 participants who signed on and got directly involved in this, we very much appreciate that. And again, as I spoke to in my opening comments, it's about partnership. It's about relationship. One of my mentors used to say, it's relationships based on mutual need. We need you. And likewise, we feel that through collaboration, we can get what we need to accomplish. The time is near, and when we talk about being at a crossroads, it means just what it indicates. It's time for us to figure out, as Bill pointed out, we could talk about minutia all day. In fact, that seems to permeate my days. But at the end of the day, what's really important is we effectively made changes that will impact what we're trying to accomplish, and that is the implementation of safe schools and getting them moving quickly. So with that, I appreciate your continued collaboration. I see many familiar faces in the room. I engage you to, or implore you to come and see us, meet with us. We'll, of course, be getting out in the field and talking more. You heard about a pilot project or a task force that we're putting together to look at closeouts. We plan on coming up with some preliminary answers in the next 30 days in terms of things that we'll be putting out for public comment. But the comments to date have been very instrumental, and I think you will see them rolling out pretty quickly here. So with that, thank you very much, and for those of you that logged on, thank you for your interest, and we will stay engaged. Have a good day.